Hey, what's going on, everybody? Ceremonial Witch is back with a different kind of episode. Before I get into it, line from Frater, as always, the man, and can't talk about Frater without talking about Birch. I really want to emphasize that they're both very important, and I don't want to make one above the other. Hence why last video I started putting a bunch of Birch videos out. I realized I put more Birch videos on than Frater videos. And you know what, they probably don't even like the fact that I'm doing that. I hope to God it doesn't offend them. The last thing I want to do is offend the people that taught me, the two men that were very influential, all the books I read and all that. I'm grateful to the people that wrote them. But what Frater and Birch do is putting out this information for free. People are putting out the books, making money off the books and all that, which, same thing. But like Greg Braden too, he's putting out information all left, right, and center. It's all free. He's trying to help people. These men are doing it, Yeah, they make money from it, but their initial reason for putting it out is is to help people. And I fucking resonate and relate with that. So I don't want to overdo it, and I'm going to try to never or no longer put anything out, I put a bunch of Frater stuff out, and then I put so much Birch in one channel, and I put some other Frater Xavier videos on that same episode, because to me, it was all one big episode. It ended up being two episodes. But it ended up, my daughter was in the kitchen. It ended up being two episodes, and I mixed it up. I put Frater episodes that talked about Birch. Birch episodes talk about Frater. I put the episode where Frater Xavier was off because of a surgery, and he let Birch go on there. He also let Darren Taylor, Ashbourne Torval, King Boudet, or something like that, on there as well. Which, check him out too. I've checked out a lot of his shit, especially his newest channel, which is really, really good shit. Normalizing magic, and he's trying to pinpoint the rituals, the stuff that has the science behind it, which is basically the energy everybody's put into those things, why those things work, and trying to cut out the things that are different, that are the different languages from different spiritualities that people use. But technically, that all just depends, and in my opinion, it all depends on your programming, but it's very interesting, and I like his point of view of it all, so you should check him out too. The guy formerly known as Ashbourne Torval, which is Darren Taylor, I want to say is his real name, and I forget the name of the fucking channel. I hate when I do that, God. But it's on Frater's channel, has one of his liked favorite channels, and it's also on Birch's channel. They're all three of them together. I mean, Frater's got an episode where he talks about people that were attacking him, and the one guy that he finally had enough of, him, Birch, and Ashbourne Torval all fucking threw at this poor son of a bitch. Man, I'd hate to be the one eating that up, But anyways, I forget initially what I wanted to get at before the thing I wanted to get at. Oh yeah, I put a few YouTube videos out today. The first one was a fuck up. I did the whole thing not knowing my headset was plugged in, and in the background I was playing my latest episode with Birch's episodes on it, and because the headset microphone was picking up the sound and being right beside the speaker, you can't hear me at all. You can see me, and you can hear me, but you hear Birch more than anything, way more than me. So it's kind of shitty. But so then I tried to make a second one, and during the second one, my laptop died as I got upstairs to my room because I brought my shit up. Please keep your voice down, Owen. Not so loud, please. And then I did a third one. So that's all on YouTube. And I have, I think, 3 or 4 other videos. One of which is me going around the outside of my house, showing my cars and all that. So the one today, you see the inside of my house, my kitchen, my stairs, and my bedroom / where my altar is currently set up. It's not necessarily my temple room, but it is technically my temple room. And just a few things about that real fast, because your temple is supposed to be sacred to you and all that, and I adhere to all those rules, and no one's allowed to touch anything on my temple. If they do, they have to tell me. If it's an accident, they need something, and they can't get a hold of me, they need to tell me as soon as they see me. And I also pre-warned everybody, I know you guys don't believe in what I believe in, but touching my my altar, going in my room, which also helps the kids stay out of my room, which may not be right, but in a way, it'll help the programming for when they're older if they decide to get into magic, which, fuck, they should. Everybody should. But when they decide to get into it, if they have that programming in their mind that, dad did magic all the time and magic is real, this is going to go into their mind. Even they may not consciously believe any of this. Subconscious is no, real or fake. So they see dad doing it all the time, it's going to be real to them. Just like I grew up knowing my grandmother was a witch, had healing powers, could read tea leaves, all that shit. So that's why this shit works for me, because that programming was already inserted in me. And once, my magic worked already, because of that programming being inserted in me, and once I got rid of the Christian fucking magic of the devil crap that was also in there, now my manifestations come twice as fast. Now it's basically, as I go up in transformation, my manifestations get better and better and better. That's basically the only thing, in my opinion, that holds me back, because as I transform, as I go through the grades, I become more evolved. As I depolarize, I can bring things faster to me. But like I said previously, why would I be able to heal somebody's cancer? I don't believe in playing God, anything like that. And like I said, I've tried to do things like that. So I don't necessarily believe in that. And, being a smoker, an ex-drug user, shit like that, the way I've treated my body in the past, until I can stop smoking and taking in caffeine. And, I've made some steps towards that, becoming vegan and only taking in superfoods and very important seeds, and eating to live, not living to eat, not eating to satisfy taste and all that. I'm actually eating to support my body. I'm eating to make my body last longer, to make my skin look better, to sustain my life, my way of living, my organs, my cells. That's I retrained my body to understand that that's important. I reprogrammed my mind to know that that's why we eat and not the reverse. Does that mean I'm not going to eat a cheesecake? No, I fucking love cheesecake. I used to eat icing right out of the fucking bin, 3 a.m. every morning. In the middle of the night, I'd wake up and have icing. Say what you want about that. Maybe it was a demon making me eat sweets. I don't know. But point is, this is what to relate it back to my altar room, it helps the kid, but this is the one. If you want to see or use or touch or understand, ask, and yes, I'll explain and do a necessary ritual to allow you to use one of these things if you want to do that. But if you're just curious and going in there to fuck around and think I'm just crazy and trying to check out what I'm doing, don't do that. You're going to bring on some bad shit to you, first of all, because those things have my energy and spirit and my mind attached to it. So, but anyways, and it helps the kids stay out of my room on top of that. And like I said, it's going to help everybody's programming. From my wife, subconscious, seeing these things happening, eventually it's going to get through to her, and it's going to get through to the kids to know, well, you know what? He's getting all these results. It's only so long you can say coincidence until it's like, how can you have all these coincidences every month? When you first start magic, you're not manifesting anything. Technically, you shouldn't be in your neophyte, but you can, and I have as well. But once you start doing it, after your first moon phase or whatever, whenever your first manifestation happens, if you're like me, then, there's 3 months. The first month you did something, second month you did something, third month you did something, 3 separate manifestations, and then your first manifestation happens. So then now technically there's 2 more manifestations ready to come, and every month you're still doing more. So you're going to keep getting these manifestations. They're not always going to be obvious to your family, but some of them are, and if you decide to tell them after it's happened, which is up to you, I don't advise in it, but if you are trying to prove a point or teach, then, it is what it is. But, they're seeing that now, that there's only so much they can chalk up to coincidence, that it's got to be something I'm doing. It's got to be, and it's not all me, it's their mind. Because like I said, I put sigils around the house everywhere for my magic, for their minds to see. Because if they're not going to use their power the way I'm focusing mine and using mine intentionally to manifest things, if they're going to keep watching TV and listening to the music and doing all the things I tell them they shouldn't do, well, yeah, fuck yeah. I'm not just going to let whoever you want to think it is, from the Illuminati, government, Queen, fucking Pope, whoever, I'm not going to let the media grab their attention and focused energy and emotion and fuck up and use it for their goals only. I'm going to get some of that, but I'm not going to do it in a way to try to change my wife or change my children or anything like that. I'm going to do it in a way that benefits my manifestations. But anyways, my children are arguing in the living room, so I gotta get 1 second here to go probably deal with that. So
I don't have good relationships with my family members. Are you a bit fucked? You know, so as soon as you acknowledge a problem, I think the possibility for change begins, but not without saying, could you not be fucked? That's the second step. Is it possible to not be fucked? 3, are you on your own going to unfuck yourself? Right? That means accepting help. For me, I knew I was a smackhead. It's obvious I was a smackhead. But I came to believe from meeting people that was much worse smackheads than me who had got clean that it was possible to not be a smackhead. But I knew that I wouldn't be able to do it on my own. If we had the answer to our problems inside our own fucking head, we'd have found it by now. If any version of psychoanalyses or whatever it is you're traipsing through to unravel the mysteries of your past, if it was going to be done in solitude, I think we would have happened upon it. This is where this program becomes interesting because it happens collectively as a group. I know that all of you have got stories. I know that any one of you could tell me something about yourself that would make me cry because it's so painful and so beautiful. I know you still carry aspirations. I know that you carry with you the heartache, the heartbreak. I know the 3 a.m. you. The third step, are you on your own going to unfuck yourself? It has sort of mystical and spiritual connotations, i.e. I happen to believe in God. I believe in God, a form of God, not some daft fucking thing written down in an old book. No, limitless consciousness, mysteries, entanglement, the roaring world of coincidence. Step 4 is where it gets a bit fucking admin heavy. Step 4 is this: write down all the things that are fucking you up or have ever fucked you up. Don't lie or leave anything out. That's a hard process. You've probably got things where someone was rude to you at school, broke your heart, made you feel insignificant, inadequate about your body or about your life or about something in you. I fucking did. Loads of things happened to me, but I've catalogued all of it. Fucking hell, it took ages. It was a right ball ache. Wrote it all down. Things that were deep in me that made me feel ashamed and separate from the world forever. Like, I could never be accepted. I'll never be good enough. I'd done that thing. That person said that thing to me. But step 5 is honestly tell someone trustworthy about how fucked you are. What was curious about that is that on my step 4, which is an inventory of all my grievances, or in the parlance of this program, resentments, there were things that were so minor I was embarrassed I could remember it. Minor little things. That person looked well. Glenn Dainty, sports day, pushed me aside and won. I was 5. Could still remember it. And then things I think, fuck, that was dark. I'd done that shit. Dark things, self-harming things, harm. And when I told the other geezer that I told this to, because as I say, this program is best practiced in communion, he just went, yeah, I've done something like that, that's not that bad. My point is this, that none of us need carry the shame anymore. None of us need live in a pain-based identity anymore. I put it to you that we live with a biochemistry that stimulates fear and desire in order that we may survive. Need fear, get on your fucking toes, wash yourself out on them planes. You need desire to get out there and hunt and procreate. But when you live in a culture that continually stimulates fear and desire in order to make you a better consumer, these biochemical advantages and imperatives become problematic. That's what I'm saying we're living in now. Having done this inventory, you'll be ready for step 6. It reveals a lot of fucked up patterns. Like, when I looked at my own life, I saw that the way I used to get expelled out of schools was the same way I would get thrown out of jobs years later. The same way that my relationship was difficult with people when I was a schoolboy became difficult romantic partnerships when I was an adult. We have got patterns, and here I will make one of the most important points to you that I can make. You don't choose between working a program and not working a program. You choose between a conscious program and an unconscious program. You are already working a program. Without question, you are working in the conditioning of your culture, your class, your family, and your school. You are the person that you were told to be, for good or for ill. What this is an opportunity to identify your patterns and your behaviours so that you can form a better aspect of yourself. I feel that we live in a culture that exacerbates and provokes the lower aspects of our nature, the fear, the desire, the lust, in order that we will be good consumers, and ignores the fact that we are altruistic, kind, loving and sweet. Them things get a little bit lost sometimes. Step 7 Are you willing to live in a new way that's not all about you and your previous fucked up stuff? You have to. That is another point in this program where there's a kind of spiritual intersection. Me, I'm a person that does pray and meditate, but for me all that means is that I don't just live my life on a material level. I don't just think, oh, I'm Russell, I'm going to go to that thing later and talk to a squire and then I'll be in a car and that's that. No, I see myself as having a life that's beyond the limited scope of sensual and what do I want to say? Gross understanding. I believe there are subtler energies at work in a human being. You know the coincidences and synchronicities from your own life. You know the mysteries of your own myth. You know the moments where, had you turned another corner, to quote dear George Michael, another addict that we lost, that maybe your life would have been different. You'd have made different decisions. You may never have met him or her. You may never have taken that job or that opportunity. That sense that perhaps we are being guided. That sense that perhaps the same way as our fingerprints are unique, there is some other code, some less easily ascertainable code that is trying to realise itself the same way that an acorn will grow into an oak tree. The same way that there is some knowledge within each seed, within each cell, that it must realise itself. If your consciousness is in attunement with this energy, then I think there are rich possibilities for us as human beings. 8 and 9, step 8, prepare to apologise to everyone for everything affected by your being so fucked up. If you've been a drug addict for any serious amount of time, you've caused some real damage to people. Or if you've been a person that's just put yourself first a lot, you will have caused real damage to people. I did. And part of my journey has been going and making amends, not just because restitution and apology are good, fine spiritual things to do, but also to remind me that I don't do that sort of thing anymore. Now when I feel the casual urge to be dismissive of people, something in me reminds me, don't treat other human beings as a commodity. People don't only exist to serve you. Every single one of us in this room has our own little story, has our own little pain, has our own little journey, and none of us needs to be subjugated into one another's lives. But there's some of us have a tendency to insert ourselves into other people's drama. Some of you are like, oh, why do I always go out of arseholes? And those of us that are arseholes are very grateful for your arsehole attraction. But you may be right. It may be better if you looked at your code, looked at your programming, looked at the kind of relationships you're drawn into. Step 9 is, having made a list of all the people you've damaged, you become willing to make amends to them, unless you make an amends would fuck their shit up bad for them. E.g., you don't go, mate, I'm ever so sorry, I've been having an affair with your wife. That was right. If that person doesn't know that, you've just made their life far, far worse. It's a program of spiritual growth and development. The final 3 steps: 10, watch out for your fucked up behaviour and thinking and be honest when it happens. 11, stay connected to your new perspective. That is an interesting thing, and that's where prayer and meditation become quite important. Like, there will be times in a day when you let go. You know, when you see a cyclist and a cab driver about to have a row in the street, they've let go. They've let go of the connection, haven't they? All that matters in that moment is, I'm going to fucking kill you. But if you were able to talk to them and go, mate, you've got your fucking family, your kids, are you willing to give your life up? There have been moments in my life where I've done it too, where I've gone, I'll fucking put all the chips of my life, I'll put on that, so I'll gamble a lot on you, mate, I'll fucking kill you. And like, for what? For what? For some moment. Like, it doesn't mean anything. So the step 11 becomes, with step 10, you're constantly observing your patterns. You're watching your mind work. Oh, look, I'm doing that shit again. Step 11 is you remain connected, so that you'll notice it. If someone provokes you, check me. I am easy provoked. If I feel men are not being respectful to me, I'm provoked. Because I'm not a conventional male. I grew up a guiding star. Guiding star becomes, are you being kind to anyone? Pause for a moment to think, have you done anything for anyone other than yourself all day today? And if the answer is no, that's a weird thing for a social animal that's meant to live in little tribes, roaming through forests and plains. If all you've done is, I want this, I want that, I want that. Now, I'm not talking about you, I'm talking about me. Me. If I don't watch myself, very self-centered little individual. So that's a sort of a bit of a 25-minute précis of how this program works. Anyone can do it. It's fucking easy. You shouldn't do it on your own. But if you're not doing it, you're being subjected to the patterns of your childhood.
And back. They were just playing Twister, so it just seemed more intense than it was, but it's because they're about to fall and shit like that. So, anyways, where was I going? Oh yeah, YouTube videos out, manifesting with people's minds and shit like that. Okay, so if anybody watched my YouTube videos, or if I think I may have talked about it on speaker before, of myself being an ex cocaine user and an ex criminal and an ex I went to jail, and I got addicted to opiates pretty bad, to the point where I never went on methadone. I've used methadone illegally because of opiates, Oxycontin, fentanyl. I never used heroin ever, but I've used from, the mildest being Tylenol 3s and Percocets to the heaviest being, Oxycontins, Hydromorph, and fentanyl patches. Smoking the fentanyl patches. Now, I never injected anything into my body. I have a weird thing with that. I think I had a video about that. Kind of floated out there a conspiracy theory about, giving blood, and if you're in magic and you have a synthetic link, someone's hair, someone's fingernails, someone's blood. If you have someone's blood, oh my god, you can do a lot of damage or a lot of healing. But if you have sorcery, necromancy, whatever you believe that type of magic to be, from whatever race, from whatever part of the world, from whatever old mythology, there is science behind, giving someone else's heart, who maybe is a murderer or stuff like that. There's all these crazy stories out there, but I floated the idea of I would never give my blood. I'll give my organs maybe when I die, but I'll never give my blood. And it's not out of disrespect, because, if my kids ever need a blood transfusion or their life is dependent on, knock on wood, not that it's ever going to happen, but if such, I don't even like saying things out loud, as far as I actually did that. I don't know what the fuck, why would I say that? But anyways, if such a predicament happened to somebody I knew, I would be thankful for everybody who has done it, and then maybe think about doing it. But I get a weird vibe, I get a weird feeling, just watching it on TV. It fucks me up. It's like a subconscious thing, because it's something that I can't even control. When I see that, I get weirded out, seeing my wife's blood, or my birth of my 2 girls, and things like that. I get so weak. Just talking about right now, I'm getting weak. I wasn't able to have a vasectomy done, hence why I had my 4th kid, my newest baby. We were supposed to stop at 3, and not that she's an accident, she's a blessing, but because I don't like surgical procedures and stuff like that. And maybe that's something rooted in me. Maybe that's something witchcrafty and magical. But point is, I floated the idea out there about blood being sacred, and give it as a sacrifice to your deity before I give it to a fucking doctor or a nurse, And then people that give blood end up getting cancer. Well, yeah, people can do whatever they want with that blood. They can they don't have to tell you what they're doing with it, And they only need a little bit of it. They need fucking something small enough to go under a microscope, and the rest of it could go to where they're saying it goes, make it look as real as they want. But anyways, I don't want to make conspiracy theories. I want to help people, not make people get worse, their mindsets worse, and in more of a fear-based thing. But where the fuck was I going with that? Oh, okay, yeah, it was just a simple point of saying I never used needles or anything like that, but I was hard into it. Now, I used methadone before because, these things are but I didn't want to go on methadone because I know methadone's very hard to get off of, and Suboxone, from what I read and heard, didn't really give you a high. It suppressed the withdrawal symptoms. Now, it didn't really do much for extreme pain. A lot of people have pain when they come off of opiates. Very hard, strong pain medication, because you're not feeling pain while you're on these things. And most people, when they don't feel pain, they go twice as hard, twice as fast, do things. And whenever that stuff's not in their system, especially when they're dependent on it, using it, for more than 10 days in a row, can create a strong enough opiate addiction to the point where you go through withdrawal. And if you're not strong enough to go through a fucking stage where you go through that pain and get over it, well, then you're going to keep using, and then eventually it's going to be years gone by, and you've sunk so much money, and you lost a lot of family members, and it's like, holy fuck, by the time you get off the shit. So I went into the Suboxone route because Suboxone doesn't get you high. You take it, and it's a gross taste, and 4 hours after you take it, it's basically when it's at its peak in your system, and you can feel a little bit of an energy boost, but it's, to me anyways, I didn't get the same energy boost from drinking coffee or being excited about magic than I do from Suboxone. Now, I am currently trying to wean myself off of Suboxone, but I am on Suboxone. And the only reason I'm bringing this up, I don't like to talk about this, but the only reason I bring this up is because I'm on a very low dose of it, and I'm very close to coming off of it. And I've said before, I help addicts out who are trying to, because there's a lot of people on Suboxone, a lot of people on methadone who, because in Canada, they give it out free. I mean, it's free. I mean, Suboxone technically isn't free. It's covered by my wife's plan, and the plan I was working at was work. But that's why the majority of people are on methadone, because methadone, unlike Suboxone, if you it's easier to get free, especially here in Canada, because most of the people that are on the system, welfare, disability, it's covered under those things. And if you have a doctor say you need it under certain circumstances, they're going to cover methadone or a version of it called methadose, which is basically the same thing, just I help addicts out. I talk to addicts, and I, truth be told, I still battle with cravings from time to time. And this is one of the reasons when these demons, these are motherfuckers are doing jumping jacks now and shit like that. That's in that same song. So that's why I keep going back and forth, because I continually use magic. I continually use my consecrated sword. Well, I mean, I haven't been. I mean, that's why I was having issues. I wasn't back on the dope or anything like that. Fucking, like I said, I can if I want to, because I take Suboxone every day. It's got an opiate blocker in it, and the thing they give to people that go to the methadone, or anybody who takes opiates can go into any methadone clinic here in Canada free of charge. They will be given either a naloxone needle or a naloxone nasal spray, or a pill, or a dropper. There's so many different ways, and naloxone is the drug that reverses the effects of overdose. So if you're taking too much opiates, where you were so high, your heart's about to stop, whatever the case is, however overdose happens, I could talk about it, but I don't really want to talk about it. It's not a subject I like to talk about, because being an ex-drug addict, talking about drugs can spark ideas, and just talking about it can make you want to use. But I think it's important for anybody who is trying to stop using drugs to actually talk about quitting and going over it, and being strong enough to be able to fight those cravings. And because if you're not, then you shouldn't talk about it until you can. But once you do develop the ability to be able to talk about this and be strong enough to not crave it, then yeah, it's important to talk about it. But anyways, naloxone is something you give to those people because it automatically puts you kind of into a withdrawal state, but it reverses the effects of it, which is pretty amazing that there's chemistry out there that if you take so many pills that they will kill you. Well, if you take this in time, a nasal spray up your nose, or I just know at the same time as that. And like I said in one of my other videos, if people think I'm on drugs because they continuously hear me going like that all the time, well, there could be some permanent damage in my nose because of, doing these pills and snorting things and cocaine and shit that I've used in the past. But mainly it's because I don't believe in breathing through your mouth to breathe. Obviously, I do it without knowing it, but I'm doing my best to reprogram and train my body to only use my nose to breathe in unless it's absolutely needed to go through my mouth. So when you hear me going like that a lot between sentences, because I'm taking my next breath, and then I'm exhaling through my mouth as I speak most of the time, and I'm always inhaling through my nose, because I know that's important for everything from spirituality to health. But that's besides the point. So naloxone is the thing they give somebody who's on who's having an OD, and it's important for you to know, so you don't assume that Corey LeBlanc, ceremonial witch, he's on Suboxone, so he's a drug user, he's a druggie, he's an ex-opiate. Well, naloxone is right in my medication. If I had a bottle here, I would read it off to you. But my pills are 8 milligrams of Suboxone, which is 8 milligrams of naloxone is right into my pill. I think every 8 milligram pill has, I think, 2 milligrams of naloxone in it, which is part of that opiate blocker. So the Suboxone, the actual drug, there's 2 drugs in it. Naloxone is one. I can't remember the name of the other one. I wish I could find a fucking pill case right now, but actually I do have one. Here it is. Give me 1 second, everybody. Sorry about that. I should have been more prepared, but I kind of do these things on the fly. And my subconscious is telling me this is something I need to talk about. So maybe someone out there needs to know, but I know firsthand because I was talking to some of the guys that I talk to about this stuff and that I help. And they've got into magic. My buddy Justin I've talked about a few times there. He's another one who's on this path and who's like me, who's an ex-addict. So, anyways, buprenorphine. Fuck, I can't even say that. It's buprenorphine. That's 8 milligrams. So that would be the opiate that's in mine, which is a specific opiate that has been created specifically for ex-addicts, and it's a very light dose to suppress your addiction cravings and your I don't want to say side effects, but your whenever you're hurting, whenever you're going through I just said the fucking word withdrawal, your withdrawal symptoms. And there's 2 milligrams of naloxone. So in a 4 milligram pill, well, that would be 1 milligram of naloxone and 4 milligrams of the buprenorphine, whatever the fuck that word is. Anyways, so the reason I'm saying that is because I want everybody to know that the pills I take do not get me high, and I can't use opiates if I wanted to. I mean, I could cleverly fucking figure out how to get high, obviously, and I have that kind of mind where I like to figure stuff out. I like to be analytical, but I'm not going to do that. It would make more sense for me to do a different kind of drug, such as, an ecstasy, a mushroom, a cocaine, or speed, because this stuff doesn't block from that. And to be quite honest, it does fucking mix well when you add, Suboxone to somebody who is using street drugs all the time. They can get high off of it, but it's more of it'll make them seem very sleepy, which kind of mimics the rolling your eyes back in your head kind of feeling of too many painkillers, but it's not the same effect. But if someone was to use it, they can, but they can also, because of the other thing in there, the naloxone in there, they can put themselves into withdrawal, because that's what that does. So me being specifically on Suboxone for the length of time that I've been on it is directly trying to get me off of drugs, and it's something I've been working at. Now, the reason I bring this up is because I hint at magic a lot to the guys I talk about. I relate to old philosophies and witchcraft and different things like that, because, they know my past about my grandmother and stuff like that, certain guys I talk to, and depending on the person and their level of openness, some guys I can bring up stuff and they think it's fascinating. Other guys, if I bring it up, I'll see their eyes like, you're a fucking idiot, so I drop it right there. But recently, I'm not going to say their names, but they found out. They actually heard my show and found out that I had a show and reached out to me and said, no, can we come talk? So I thought it was, he was having issues, cravings, whatever. He needs to be talked out of it. And it was about, he wanted to talk about magic and shit like that. I'm like, that's fucking sick. Some of my own town, reached out and all that, because I don't publicize this at the witch stores, my new age stores I go to, or any of the stuff in this town. There are very few people know in my hometown what I do. Only a select few that I've told. So being reached out and all that, and he asked me, because, it's been a while since we talked about what I was on, if I was off or not, because he seems to think that, because he's been really looking up occult stuff and learning about this, and he is under the assumption that he had to quit and be off. I see it as something that can't be sustained long term. But if you're given a prescription from a doctor, and for that very reason, that's one of, well, I know a few people that are in that situation where they get Percocets and or Oxycontin, and they can perform magic all they want. They tend to do it whenever their dose isn't in them as much, and they don't like to go to their temple when they're on the drug as intensely. And that's the same thing with me. I don't like to go to temple if I've just taken my Suboxone or anything like that out of respect for the divine in my own mind. Take it easy in there! Sorry about that. I just want to make sure my daughter doesn't get hurt. Well, my one boy, he gets very hyper and shit like that. But anyways, so this person who reached out to me was very... he basically made it up in his mind and was running the program that, because he was a drug user, that he wasn't able to manifest anything. And that's not true. I mean, I don't really consider marijuana a drug, because marijuana can do everything from heal you to open your mind to have, mystical things, to picking up better and more bits of information when you're on it than you wouldn't, to help you focus better, to anything and everything, depending on how you use it. So, I mean, but technically it is classified as a drug, and you can manifest using fucking marijuana. You can manifest using mushrooms. So there's very powerful hallucinogenics out there that are, I think in the States it's worse than Canada, but they're classified pretty high up on bad drugs, whereas things like maybe cocaine should be higher up than hallucinogenic. That's not even addictive, and has actually proven that using hallucinogenics can help you come off of a really bad drug like an opiate. But yet they're more illegal, and that's probably just because they are spiritual. It's something that grows in the earth that hasn't really been altered by man, whereas cocaine and opiates, yes, they come from the earth, poppy seed and the coca leaf. And there are places in the world where, I have poppy seed right here in my fucking cupboard. It's a fucking spice, and there are teas everywhere where cocaine leaf is used, and it's not addictive and all that shit. But when man gets it, synthesizes it, adds whatever, does the process that we do to it, and turn it into a drug, then it's different. But whenever you're eating something like probably peyote, different cactuses, magic mushrooms, or shrooms rather, you're eating something that's happening. It's a more natural occurrence in Mother Nature. So, to me, I don't have a problem with anybody using that for spiritual experiments and experiences, unless, maybe they become addicted to it and they can't have those experiences without it. Then I'd say you might need to get off for a while until you can do it without it, and then go back and forth maybe. And, get two different perspectives of it. But I truly believe that that's a gift from Mother Nature per se. Now, because I have, quote unquote, potentially an addictive personality, I've never really done anything more hallucinogenic. I've done shrooms and I've done steering you on it for life. Well, then that's a whole different ballgame. So, yeah, which is the consent. But when people are smoking pot and they're forgetting about their problems and they're enjoying their life instead of dwelling on the cancer, they're tending to fucking beat the cancer. No magic required, just mind over matter, just enjoying their life, getting high and trying not to think about their problems and dwelling on their problems and putting emotion into their problems and making it worse. Instead, they're enjoying their life, getting high, having fun. And so our Canadian government made it fucking legal. That's probably one reason that they're not telling us, is just my opinion and what's been told to me. But on top of that, if you legalize marijuana, then your crime rates go down. Because anytime someone's arrested for growing, or selling or smoking, well, that's no longer an issue now. Now it's like if you get caught smoking and driving, well, it's like a DUI, which isn't technically a criminal offense. I know, I've got one at a young age. So, but anyways, it's a gift from Mother Nature. It's a way to tap into the earth. It's a way to speak to the earth. It's a way for people to have an experience. These people, might not go down the path I go down, or other people listen to me go down. So instead, they go down the drug path and they decide to try that drug, and then they have a mystical experience which changes their life, and they decide to become spiritual and no longer do every drug under the sun. Maybe only stick to those drugs, and maybe marijuana at that point. It's another way to get people to realize that spirituality is something that we need to focus on just as much as our finances, just as much as what we want to do, our passion in life. And all these things are all connected. So that's my view of hallucinogenic drugs. I know there's things about the Egyptians having opium mixed with hallucinogenics and some kind of not a methamphetamine, but an amphetamine such as, like speed or something like that. There's all these stories about they found those in the pyramids and all that, and those are just stories. Are they real? Maybe, probably, but if you go over to the Seinfeld episode where Elaine pissed positive for opium, and it's because she had a poppy seed fucking bagel. It could be similar to that. They could have had the fucking herb poppy seed in there, and they're just retelling the tale from a different perspective to make you think, the Egyptians are bad. When Egyptians is one of the reasons we have a lot of magic today. But anyways, the point I'm trying to get at here is if you are addicted to any kind of opiate or anything like that, and I know here in Canada it's a big problem. There's a lot of kids getting into it thinking, taking their parents' Percocets or taking these drugs at school, these new designer drugs from the new Xanax bars that, at least here in Canada, a lot of this is not the actual fact. Coke is Coke. And drinking with an opiate, which is the reason I don't drink much. I do drink from time to time, but being that the drug I take does have an opiate in it, I'm very responsible, and I try not to drink as much as possible. And if I do, it's 1 or 2 beers or a very small amount of mixed liquor drinks. Because when you add alcohol to opium, it stops your breathing in your sleep. It's a very peaceful way to go, but it's a very common way to go, and it's what's happening often. Anyways, here in Canada, we're not hearing about it as much, but I know it's still happening. And methadone clinics are booming, and things like that are happening more and more and more and more and more. But it is an epidemic.
Good morning, Mr. Brown. Thank you. Please have a seat. Mr. Brown, Mr. Summers, thank you for giving evidence to the committee's inquiry into drugs. Mr. Russell Brand, you gave written evidence to this committee, which members of the committee have read. Could I start with a point about what you say in your evidence? That you disagree with the legalization of drugs because you think that a deterrent effect is necessary. Is that right?
I don't feel entirely qualified to talk about legislation. For me, what's more significant is the way that we socially regard the condition of addiction. It's something that I consider to be an illness and therefore more a health matter than a criminal or judicial matter. I don't think that legalisation is something that I've, as I said, particularly qualified to get into. I can see areas, in fact, where decriminalisation might be considered useful and more efficient, in like countries like Portugal or Switzerland where there's been trials. It seems to have had some efficacy. But for me, it's more important that we regard people suffering from addiction with compassion, and that there's a pragmatic rather than symbolic approach to treating it. And I think the legislative status of addiction and the criminalisation of addicts is kind of symbolic and not really functional. I don't see how it especially helps. But I'm not saying let's have a wacky free-for-all where people go around taking drugs. Didn't help me much.
You're a former heroin addict.
Yeah.
Briefly, could you tell us how you got onto drugs and then how you managed to come off it and how many years you were on hard drugs?
I see you've incorporated the word briefly now into the question, as you already know it's my propensity for verbosity. I became a drug addict, I think, because of emotional difficulties, psychological difficulties, and perhaps a spiritual malady. For me, taking drugs and excessive drinking were the result of a psychological, spiritual or mental condition. So they're symptomatic. I was like saying,
Your body's going to react to it with a different substance.
recovery is the best in this condition, and the support structures exist to get people to maintain recovery, abstinence-based recovery. What we want is more research and funding into abstinence-based recovery, and to be able to filter a solution for people suffering from
The criminal justice system arrests.
From my experience speaking to people in the criminal justice system, and from my own personal experience being arrested, there's some confusion and ignorance around addiction, and it's quite understandable because a lot of drug addicts, like speaking personally, are antisocial. They are a strain on society. They necessarily engage in criminal activity. They're a public nuisance in many ways. I felt when I was arrested that the police were doing a necessary job of enforcing the laws of this country, and they were doing what they had to do. But it wasn't until I had access to abstinence-based recovery that I was able to change my behaviour and significantly reduce, all but obliterate, my criminal activity, apart from the occasional skirmish.
Final question from me on this section is the issue of legal highs. We've been very concerned in the evidence that we've received about the number of legal highs that are available, and young people who seem to be able to take legal highs whenever they are banned or proposed to be banned, a new legal high emerges. Do you think that this is something that does affect young people? Is this now the drug of choice for young people?
I don't know because I'm not young enough anymore, but I know that young people will always want to get high, and I think that what we need is a pragmatic approach to this. In a way, for me, as I said before, Keith, it's insignificant the substance that you're using, whether it's alcohol, illegal street drugs. The legal status of a drug is irrelevant to a drug addict. If you're a drug addict, you're getting drugs. That's it. You're going to get them. So, in a way, it's probably best to make it simple. As for legal highs, what I think we need to do is address the social, mental and spiritual problems that are leading young people, or people of all ages, to taking drugs. And so I think what we need is research into abstinence-based recovery and more awareness around it.
On to some of those points with other questions. Bridget Phillips.
Chair, currently working on a programme about addiction and how it's viewed in society. What messages are you hoping to get across in that programme?
The messages that we're hoping to get across in this programme is that maintenance of drug addiction through state-sponsored substances like methadone should only be deployed as part of a reduction with the ultimate aim of abstinence-based recovery. That we need to start regarding addiction in all its forms as a health issue as opposed to a judicial and criminal issue. That we need to change the laws in this country, and we need to have a more compassionate, altruistic, loving attitude to the people with the disease of addiction, and recognise that these people with the proper help, access to the proper treatment, can become active and helpful members of society, like myself, some would argue that point, or perhaps more obviously Chip Summers, who, a man with a criminal record as long as your arm, now runs a treatment centre and has been clean for 27 years. That's the message, that we don't want to discard people, we don't want to life them off on methadone and leave them on the sidelines. We need to bring them in to society, offer them treatment, and once again neutralise the toxic social threat that they offer as criminals, because they have to fund their habit, or even if it's a legal drug like alcohol, they're clattering into things, driving drunk, pain in the arse people. We need to offer them treatment and activate them and incorporate them into our society. So the message is ultimately one of pragmatism, altruism and compassion in all areas of the condition.
Thank you. Mr. Summers, we will have specific questions for you, but if you want to chip in, if I may put it like that, at any stage, please feel free to do so, but we do have... Is there anything you want to add? What you've heard so far?
Splendidly.
Thanks, Chip. Chip runs the treatment centre where I got clean. So
we're coming on to him in a minute, Mr. Brown.
He's already the puppeteer behind each and every articulation.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Michael Ellis has a question for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Brown, you've said that addiction is an illness.
Yes.
But would you say that it's also fair to characterise it to a large extent as self-induced?
Not really.
Like many other illnesses. And also that it does carry with it victims. Many people who are on drugs commit offences against other people, do they not? So it differs in that respect as well, doesn't it? When one's looking at the criminal justice system, doesn't one also have to have some compassion and consideration for the victims of crime where those crimes are committed by people under the influence of drugs?
Michael, I'm very glad you've asked me that question. It's a very important question, and it's one that we need to address. Of course, the victims of acquisitive drug-related crimes are important and need to be taken care of. We were with Chief Superintendent Graham Bartlett the other day of Sussex Police, a wonderful man, a good civic-minded gentleman. It's his belief that by regarding addiction as an illness, by offering treatment instead of a more punitive approach, we can prevent people from committing crimes. Just personally, I was a criminal when I was a drug addict by virtue of my addiction and the ways that I had to acquire money to get drugs. Anecdotally, Chip was an armed robber in and out of Nick all the time. I hope you don't mind me telling them this. And other people I've met, criminality is a necessary component. Now, of course, we're not saying forget the victims, but I'm saying it's better to address the social situation pragmatically. And I think we all know this. By prescribing methadone to people, most people on methadone are using illegal drugs to supplement their habit. They're not addressing the root problems. We need to approach the victims with respect. Where there has been criminal behaviour, it needs to be dealt with correctly. But perhaps within the penal system itself, we can offer treatment to addicts, like the brilliant work that's done by RACT in various institutions and prisons.
So you would say there needs to be a carrot and stick, would you?
I don't think there needs to be a carrot or a stick. Both of those things seem like bizarre metaphors. I think what there needs to be is love and compassion to everybody.
React to you after.
Know from you, Mr. Brand, that you think that having got out of the cycle of addiction,
yes.
I congratulate you for that.
Thank you.
Whether you would like to position yourself as a role model in society for those who might look to you as an example.
As the great Tupac Shakur said, role is something people play, model is something that people make. Both of those things are fake. What I want to offer people is truth and authenticity in the treatment of this illness, in our regard to the criminal components of it, in assisting victims, and in the way we legislate and organise our society. I can't be responsible, as you know, you lot hold committees all the time about the reprehensible behaviour of our media. What the cipher of my people with the disease of addiction?
Could I say something? Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Summers.
As far as we were concerned, those people who are brave enough, who are the number of people who seek treatment, because it gives out a very positive message that recovery is possible. And when Russell Brand's book came out, the number of referrals to our treatment centre was just hugely exaggerated, because people suddenly discovered that treatment was possible, help was possible, and it was better, and people could get better. And it made a profound difference. And I would hope that actually more people in the public eye, whether they be, I suppose by celebrities they are in the public eye, will come forward and have the bravery to do so, because it does encourage people.
So celebrities can be a very positive role.
Absolutely. But of course then it can backfire as well when people make a big fuss about being in recovery and then relapse. And of course that's unfortunate. But we're fortunate with Russell that he's maintaining a good recovery, and that continues to be a good role model.
Brand, do you think more people need to know about things like cocaine production, where cocaine comes from? The committee went to Colombia to look at the effects that the harvesting of cocaine was having on the people of Colombia, who are extraordinarily poor and were forced to be involved in this kind of activity. Do you think if there was more focus on where it all came from and how it affected the communities, that would help stop people getting involved?
No, Keith, no more than the industrial consequences of oil production affect people using their cars. People don't care about industry, people care about getting the resource that they require. The illegality makes no difference, the consequences in the nation of origin makes no difference. I think what we need is to address the emotional, mental and spiritual problems that lead to addiction. Of course, any illegal industry or the cocaine manufacture in South American nations or wherever has a negative consequence for their nations, but I don't think that that's something that individual drug addicts are going to be affected by, to be honest, because they're normally on drugs.
Very much. Lorraine Fulbrook has some questions to Mr. Summers.
I'd like to ask a question to Mr. Summers. Focus 12 has 3 high-profile patrons, Mr.
Yes.
Brand, Davina McCall and
Boy
Boy George. And that's something that was probably unthinkable about 50 years ago.
Yes.
Do you think that has led to the destigmatisation of addictions, or do you think it's led to a wider acceptance of drug use in society in general?
I don't think it's encouraged people to use drugs. I think there have been some people who have made a sort of positive... I was right in the middle of my answer then.
Still a good speech. Just got some ladies
No,
going
man.
by.
I think that the public is fine. Yes, Mr. Summers.
Yeah, I've completely forgotten where I was.
It's about high-profile patrons
Oh, yeah.
and destigmatisation, or does it?
I
lead
think there are
to
certain
wider-
celebrities who have made a sort of positive message about drug use, which has not helped the situation at all. I think most people who get better from drug addiction are a very positive influence. But I think there are some celebrities, obviously, who have probably contributed to people using drugs because they make it look glamorous, they make it look interesting, and I don't suppose that helps. But I think as long as, while they're using, they will tend to do that. But if they stop using, then they obviously become a very positive role model. But I do think there are some celebrities who have made the matter worse. I don't think on a national scale it's made a huge difference. I think there are one or two people who are influenced by that, but I don't think it's...
Chief Executive of Focus, I mean,
Yeah.
how do you pick your celebrities, Zipper?
The ones that get clean, I'll grab them.
Very helpful. Nicola Blackwood.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I'd like to congratulate you on your work on abstinence-based work. I think that it's very effective, and I share your suspicion about long-term methadone maintenance. But I was struck by your comments about the problems of highlighting drug use in communities. Do you think that we're doing enough, or do you think that there's a risk that our harm reduction-based approaches to drugs education are giving a false impression that there are some drugs which are safe if they're used correctly?
I think we are not doing anything like enough to give an honest answer to the problems of drugs. I think we are giving a rather clouded message about drug use. I think there's a lot more that we could be doing about honestly educating people about drugs. I don't think we address it and take it on board properly enough. And I feel that we should be doing much more, especially at an educational level. We should be giving honest education. I don't think many schools are giving honest education to young people. We've been educating young people now for 15 years, and it hasn't had a major influence on the number of drug use. I think we need to change how we're doing education of young people.
Well, how? Because
by giving more honest information. It's no good just going into schools and saying drugs are bad, stop it. Because in each of those schools there will be people who are using cannabis, who are using ketamine, who are using ecstasy. Not all the school, but some of them will be. And if you don't give people both the good and the bad of drug use, they won't listen to you. Because there are lots of people in schools who are smoking cannabis and not dropping dead. You have to give both the positive and the negative side of it. I don't think we're doing that. I think we're giving too much of the negative side of it and not giving honest information. Unless it's honest, people won't listen.
Thank you. Dr. Julian Hubbard.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Summers, you're an advocate for abstinence-based approaches. You presumably know there's been work by Professor Strang, for example, published in The Lancet, which showed that there was good evidence for methadone maintenance and very high cost effectiveness, fairly good for heroin maintenance, and a lack of evidence for abstinence. Do you think that abstinence is the answer for everybody, or are you arguing that there are people for whom it is a very good option?
I think it is an admirable aim for everybody. Not everybody can achieve it, not everybody can give up smoking. But I think it is. I think there's a really good purpose for methadone usage at a certain stage. But just to park people on methadone for 4 to 7 years and more is criminal, really. I mean, just to keep people locked into that addiction, because methadone usage is a dependency, you're totally dependent. I think it has a role, but I think it gets overused, and I think we just tend to use it as a response to everything, and we don't do enough to intervene. I think it would be an admirable aim for everybody. I don't think methadone usage is a good thing. I see very few people on methadone who are leading good, stable lives. I think most of the people who are using methadone are also using other drugs on top. If I saw it producing good stability, I would be much more in favour of it. I don't see that. What I do see is that people who are abstinent lead good, clean and decent lives, but obviously not everybody can achieve it.
I think that suggests that further research is needed to check the results. Can I also just ask, really, for both of you, because obviously we have finite resources to spend. If we're going to spend more money on treatment, and if we're going to spend more money on education, money has to be taken from somewhere. I mean, one possible suggestion is that we spend less money on doing the policing of possession, for example. Is that something which you would support, or would you see things in a different way?
I think that's a brilliant idea, as a matter of fact, and I think that there's people within the criminal justice services that share that view. I think that, you've got to appropriate these resources from somewhere, and there's already been brought up, mate, in here. It's like that. It's not penalising people for the possession of drugs is costly and expensive. A good number of the of times I was arrested was simply for possession, and the administrative costs of that would be better spent, I think, on education and addressing and treatment. I think that would be a very, very sensible use of those redirected funds.
Mr. Summers?
I feel like I'm in school now because I've forgotten the question.
Like, do you think instead of nicking people for possession, they should stick it into treatment and education?
Thank you for that translation, Mr. Bryant. Mr. Summers?
I think there's an awful lot of money wasted on small-time possession of small amounts of drugs, which are just part and parcel of the daily hustle and bustle of using. I think there is an awful lot of police time wasted on that. And I'm not saying that we should legalise it, but I think if we could get rid of some of that, because that sort of just minor possession is just part of the everyday life of being an addict. And, it would be... I certainly think there's a massive difference between decriminalising and legalising. I think it's good to treat it as a health issue rather than a criminal issue, but I'm not in favour of legalising things. But I think we do waste a lot of money.
You're going to be getting kicked downstairs.
Quite a lot of time in prison on accounts of possession.
Yes, I did.
But also armed robbery to get drugs.
I think Nicola
We're not going anywhere
Blackwood...
anymore. We're staying
Mr. Brown, I
here.
think Mr. Nicola Blackwood has a quick supplementary.
Thank you, Chair. There's quite a gap between education and full-blown addiction and treatment for abstinence. And in that gap,
it's not our
you
job to
have
decide
first
what
use
you want for a
and so on.
snack, man.
And what
We
you
offer
need
you
is
something, you don't
intervention
want
during
it.
that period to
Fuck, it's not our
prevent
fucking problem.
and sort of
Can't
prevention.
figure it out. You
And some
can't
of
figure
that
it out,
prevention
man.
is perhaps first arrest for prevention and diversion programs. Are you suggesting that we should be removing all spending on those intermediate steps in drugs policy?
No, I think we should do it better.
Okay.
Thank you. Chairman, I'd like to ask both the gentlemen, what are your views on decriminalisation or legalisation of drugs?
Chip's already been pretty clear on the subject. I'm not a legal expert. I'm saying that it's to a drug addict, the legal status is irrelevant. It's at best an inconvenience. If you need to get drugs because you're a drug addict, you're going to get drugs regardless of their legal status. So the more money you waste in administering and controlling that, I think if there's a few...
Both celebrities and recovering addicts have a profound effect on... I think there's so that gets treated like... I think there's a real argument for decriminalising it. Any justification for legalisation.
Yes, of course. Lorraine Fulbright has another.
But if you legalise or decriminalise cannabis, you're not taking away the problem. We've seen the other end where there is a serious and organised crime issue and a narco-terrorism issue,
I know he's tired and
which
all that.
ruins people's lives. I mean, murders people, and it causes conflict in countries. So, I mean...
I'm not advocating the legalisation of cannabis. I'm just saying
It's an argument.
if there was any drug at all that you could put forward an argument for legalising, cannabis is the one you've got the best chance with. But there's no... How on earth do you justify the usage of heroin or crack cocaine or anything like
But
that?
making it illegal is not working anyway, Chip, so it's not like, I just think that there needs to be honesty and authenticity around this issue so that people in Parliament don't look like they're out of touch. So I think it's really good that you're holding this committee, but some of this information is already accessible.
Thank you. Final question from Mr. Ellis.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just, I think you both referred to a preference for ignoring what you described as the more minor offending.
Daddy's going Dodo too. Mommy's going Dodo.
Can I suggest to you that a lot of the more minor offending leads to some of the more major
everybody Dodo.
And that actually what one is doing, if one was to ignore those types of offences, would be to make the matter
Boo,
worse.
run downstairs and grab the
society
baby
who is
monitor.
suffering under the increased levels of crime, but also
Please.
for the offender who would be less likely to learn the lessons of having been arrested and be more likely to get worse.
Arrested, let me just interrupt for a bit, because otherwise it's like they're telling us what to do. Being arrested isn't a lesson, it's just an administrative blip. You need to demonstrate an awareness of the situation. Yes, of course, in many ways the disease or the condition of addiction does exacerbate, and if you start taking drugs it's likely you'll take worse drugs, and if you're taking expensive drugs you will end up committing crime. But again, mate, what we need to identify is a degree of authenticity and compassion in the way we deal with this problem. Otherwise you just seem like you don't know what you're talking about. We've talked about them, you can tell what party they're in from their questions, innit?
What about the victims of the crime? I think all parties are interested in victims of crime.
Of course we are, that's what we're saying. We're not saying that they ignore victims.
I think we're running out of time. I have a final question about...
Time is infinite.
unfortunately,
We cannot run out of time.
It is, but for this committee, I'm
Who's
afraid-
next? Theresa May? She may not show up. Check she knows what day it is.
Mr. Brand, I have a final question for you.
It's not quite a variety show, Mr. Brand.
You're providing a little bit of variety, though.
Mr. Brand, you have
making it more like Dad's Army.
Mr. Brand, you have 4.5 million Twitter followers.
Oh yes.
And 1.5 million Facebook followers. Having gone through addiction and then rehabilitation, what is your message to young people who want to get involved in drugs? What would you say to them about the effects that it has?
My message isn't for young people. My message is for people that have this condition of addiction. If you have the condition of addiction, there is help available for you, and I recommend abstinence-based recovery. I think some people can safely take drugs. I think they can, as long as it doesn't turn them into criminals or harm their health. Then I don't feel like it's any of my business. So I'm not here to do some Just Say No stuff. The kids that sung that Just Say No were all taking drugs in the White House when they were visiting Nancy Reagan. It's a further demonstration of the disjunct between reality and authenticity. Let's have an authentic, truthful, honest debate and some funding for abstinence-based recovery.
Mr. Summers, do you have anything to add to that? With the excellent work you're doing in your charity?
I tend to deal with I get very muddled in all the kind of legalisation, decriminalisation. What I tend to do is deal with a problem when it exists, and I agree completely that when those people come into treatment, they have damaged a lot of people in the public. They are harming at least 4 or 5 other people in their families who are significantly distressed by that behaviour, and I try and prevent that, and I think the best way of preventing that in a long-term basis is ultimately abstinence treatment. I think that's when you stop causing harm to families, stop causing harm to the public, and that's your best chance, because at the moment I see people who are not in abstinence programs still continuing to cause distress to families and the public.
Mr. Summers, Mr. Brown, thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.
And thank you for your written evidence. Order, could we have our next witnesses, please? Thank you very much.
Cheers.
So yeah, sorry about that. My daughter's having a freak out about her bubble, but so yeah, alcohol and opiates are a bad mix, and there's a lot of street drugs out there, and it's very dangerous, and it's very much a problem. So I talked about Canada legalizing marijuana, which another parts are getting there, probably change that. I doubt they will, but they can, because they're making a ton of money out with all the legal distributors. The government version of marijuana, cookies, all these different ways to smoke or eat or use the drug that are legal. It's been pretty popular, and they're making a lot of money. And so I don't know if the States or any other places, it's pretty much taking a page out of Amsterdam and any other country that has already done this technique. But it might be a reason to try to reduce. I give 2 reasons why. From the cancer reason, from the decriminalization reason, but it could be another reason why they did it was to, let's legalize pot, so people use pot instead of the opiates, because having to pay for people's medication, everybody who's on disability or welfare is methadone, and it's probably also pretty fucking expensive. So, now pots, they go grow your own pots, basically what they're telling you, and they're going to sell pot to make some of that money, because they have to keep paying for the companies that make methadone, and have to keep paying for everybody who's on opiates. But if they don't do that, if they don't give that shit out, well then anybody who gets hooked on those drugs are going to go around, and because, there's already pharmacies being held at gunpoint here in my little ass hometown, and more in the bigger towns. I'm sure anybody who lives in the States or any other country has seen the same thing happen, and it's for have a cocaine habit, they can get prescribed Ritalin, pretty fucking easily, because it mimics the same thing, and it's the legal version of it. Whereas my doctor doesn't really believe in doing that because he thinks it's just adding to the problem. And they can get a medical marijuana. I mean, prior to this law happening, they were giving everybody the license to be able to grow and buy pot. I mean, now it's illegal, so they don't have to do that anymore. But prior to this, they were handing those out. Now I don't know if they give those people more special privileges. I could see something like that happening if it hasn't already happened. Everybody can grow 4, so these people that have an addiction problem, well, to help keep them pacified and not doing stupid criminal activity or whatever the case may be, they're allowed to grow 8 plants instead of the traditional 4, or whatever the case may be, or have a higher, because they make higher potency pots that are supposed to be for the public, but they tend to get backdoored out of the store. But maybe that's what those are for. The different cancer patients can get higher dosages of potencies and the pills and shit like that. So maybe that's what's happening now. I don't know, and I don't really care. But I'm pretty much off the magic topic right now. But I think it's important because I'm over here talking about my manifestations in my life and trying to tell people how to do things. But if people don't know everything about me, every detail about me, then how can they make an informed decision if what I'm putting out there is going to be right for them, or if they resonate with me or not? And this could help make me lose people, because there's a lot of people out there that believe that the people that do drugs or do bad things, criminal activity, are bad people, and they don't ever change. And I'm here to tell you that's not fucking true. I don't ever want to do opiates again. I want to be off my Suboxone because I don't want to be addicted to anything. And going through what I'm going through in the self-transformation, it seems easier and more likely than ever that I could do it. Before using magic, I was on the highest dose and had no carries, whereas now, after you're clean for so long, if you don't cheat, you don't just go there for your dose and then still use drugs in between, they'll let you take drugs home, and that's where I'm at. I don't have to go there every fucking day and shit like that. I have all the benefits, and I am trying to get off, and I don't do criminal activity now. And why is that? Well, maybe I would still be doing criminal activity if I was still having to work a 9 to 5 and not be able to pay my bills. I mean, you can always look at things from a different perspective, but the perspective I take now is I don't focus on my bills. I may have bills. I may have just as much as bills. I may have less. I may have more, but it's irrelevant because I know there are always going to be bills. Whether I'm rich or poor, there's always going to be bills. Whether I'm doing drugs or not, there's going to be bills. Whether I'm doing criminal activity or not, there's going to be bills. It's not like I can just start fucking hustling again, selling smokes or pot or coke or opiates and fix all my bill problems. No, I'm going to fucking piss it away because it's not what I'm supposed to be fucking doing. And I know this now, but had I not known this, it wouldn't fix my fucking problems. But there's no reason to do that now because I know that magic works. I know, I was skeptical, just like the person I spoke to today who was asking me, who said whenever he's clean, he's going to start using magic. And right now he's just trying to learn everything he wants to learn about it. And I said, you don't have to do that. Start your neophyte now. I gave him all the fucking books, all the information, gave him my fucking channel, told him to do Frater and Birch first before me, read the Kabbalah and all that, and then maybe get my take after if you want. He said, no, he's going to look at my shit first and all that. But I'm like, anyways, I'm not going to self-promote, but I had the same perspective that, because I'm a drug user, that I'm not going to, or on Suboxone, no longer a drug user, but I'm still on a drug, technically. I had the programming, the mindset that I wasn't going to be able to manifest anything, that I wasn't going to be having any luck, because, to me, it was wrong in my head what I was doing, even though, I was seeking help and getting better and better in my life and changing my life. Actually being a change, actually changing. Where change is possible, but it's not fucking easy. It's kind of like magic. It's not for the fucking meek at heart. You have to fucking really want to change. You want to diet, you want to lose weight, you have to really fucking want it. You want to fucking become a successful businessman, you really got to fucking want it. You want to learn how to play the guitar, you really got to fucking want it. If you don't, if you just have a passing fancy, or you try and it's too hard and you just give up, well then yeah, this shit's not for you. But anyways, I thought the same thing, and I realized that was just another programming in my fucking mind. Once I remove that programming, it's gone. And, now it's time to... I haven't used magic to try to get off the box, and because I've been just using my will, and just be told, with my wife and my financial situation is great, but because I'm not actually working, and in her mind is the same old programming that everybody has until they get rid of it, that, unless you're born wealthy, you don't have this programming, but you have to work a job to pay your bills. And if you don't work a job, well, you're going to lose all your shit, and things are going to come and you got to be able to pay. But that's a mindset. That's a way, that's a perspective. That's worrying about something is the worst thing you can do. Like the smoking example. Smoking, yes, can give you lung cancer. But worrying about getting lung cancer without smoking is more likely to give you the lung cancer than smoking and not worrying about it. And if you're doing both, then you're fucked. So if you don't worry about lung cancer, if you don't worry about secondhand smoke affecting your children and shit like that, I'm not saying it's not going to happen, but I'm saying your odds are a hell of a lot better. Now, I'm not saying to do that and you can do whatever you want. Treat your body like shit. No, you start doing that, your body's going to tell you, I'm about to give you a disease, so you learn the lesson and get rid of this shit. So you should always be trying to better yourself. When you know something is wrong, you shouldn't just not worry about it so you don't have the bad effects. That's a good step to take while you're trying to get rid of the addiction or the bad habit. But it's not the answer, But if you never knew, like whenever smoking came out and they were popularizing it, kind of like Wi-Fi is right now. Well, there are studies telling everybody Wi-Fi is bad and Wi-Fi can kill you and all that, but it hasn't actually been proven that Wi-Fi can kill somebody, or maybe even aspartame or stuff like that. But that's the way smoking was way back when, and now it's illegal to advertise smoking brands, unless it's vaping without the nicotine part. But so eventually that's going to come down the pipe. It's kind of like the way music, Elvis Presley, Johnny Cash, back in those days when rock and roll came out. The premise for movies like Grease and Footloose, or mainly Footloose. Or magic, when music was of the devil. Funny how it always starts with an M. Well, not always witchcraft, but that's basically a reverse M. But anyways, music was of the devil, devil's music, choir music and, classical music was the only ones that were okay. But if you go back to Pythagoras, yeah. I'm pretty sure he's the one that, it was Greek, and he started making music, but he had to hide to make music because that wasn't even accepted way back when, and that's basically how classical music was born, through math with strings and realizing a string tied at two ends, right, tight, would make a sound, and then if you minus, put your finger in the middle, made it tighter, you minus some of the tension there basically, or added a restriction, or made it, anyways, however you want to look at it, you add a finger here and a finger there, well, then it make a different sound, but that was considered bad. But anyways, back to like the 40s and the 50s, where music was of the devil, well, now the magic is of the devil. It just keeps fucking changing, and that should tell you that the progression, eventually this is going to be accepted and something else is going to be of the devil. And it's the opposite for things like I'm talking about, like smoking is the opposite. It came out first, but then now it's bad for you, and then things are gonna keep happening like this. But anyways, so the point of that was to always, worrying is the worst part of anything, and my wife finally understands that, so she's no longer worrying. And as she's not worrying, my wife used to spend a lot and say, fuck it, we're going to get paid next week, it's okay. But then 3 or 4 days before the paycheck and bills started coming in, she would start worrying, and I told her, I'm like, you don't worry. And then she started overspending and then just not worrying about it. And that's kind of what I'm kind of trying to talk at. You can't smoke and you just not worry about it over and over again. Eventually you have to either quit the smoking, or, fix your finances basically, or, whatever the case is. You can't just it's not sustainable to just keep smoking and saying, I'm never going to get lung cancer. You do eventually, you have to do the one, stop worrying while you fix the problem. And then once the problem's gone, then you don't have to worry about the not worrying part anymore. So anyways, so she's got a lot better at that. But in this process, she's actually watching how much she spends. She's been saving more and been paying the bills, and you know what I mean? Instead of, I really want this thing, but I'm supposed to pay this bill. Well, no, she's not even thinking about that. She'll either keep it in the account and say, I'm not thinking right, and I'll make a decision when I'm better suited for this. And then the next day she'll wake up and she'll pay the fucking bill, kind of thing. So just by following that simple process, she's evolving and doing better, and everything has gotten a hell of a lot better around here. But anyways, that was a message I was trying to relate to my friend, telling him that, you know, that's programming and that's all you have to change. You know, you understand that you don't want to be on methadone your whole life and all that, but for right now, it is the lesser of the evils, because, yeah, okay, it can be debated, it's a drug and it's still bad for you and all that, and you're still technically addicted to it, but you went on that to better your life, and you are trying to change, and people can change, but you have to really want it. And it's a really good thing that these things are out there for us, because if they weren't out there for us, well, then it would really suck. But I am grateful that those things were out there, and like I said, I at the risk of losing viewers talking about this subject, but I think it matters, and I think it affects a lot of people. People that are addicted to drugs aren't evil. There could be a lot of things that could cause their addiction, and it could be rooted spiritually, it could be rooted program, family, stress, psychology, you know, hypnosis, demons, whatever you want to call it. There's a lot of things that could be attached to why people do and use these drugs and get into these things, and it just is what it is. But at the fear of losing people, you know, I'm going to talk about this because I want to inform everybody of my situation, my circumstances, and you know, before Magic, I was in a rough place, and you know, I got on Suboxone before I started Magic, straight up, and I started getting carries and all that, but I keep fucking up, and you know, back then, whenever I was getting the cravings to use, and like I said, knowing that I was on Suboxone, I made a smart choice because I couldn't use opiates if I wanted to. And I tried way back when I first started, you know, peer pressure, drinking, whatever. I would get the idea to use, but I wouldn't do anything. So that's when I would cheat with different things, with Ritalin, because, you know, I'm technically ADD and all that. And, you know, I've had Ritalin before and shit like that, but mainly with speed or coke and shit like that way back, like I said, when I was working before, way before Magic and shit like that. And back then it would seem like a craving. It's hard to kind of go back there, but it'd be a thought, it'd be a craving, and it'd be hard to overpass and overcome. And I'm not gonna lie, those things still happen. I still get them, and you know, but now when it happens, it's a whole different ball game now that I know, and the Magic and what I know about thoughts and spirits and ideas and how they can come from different things, different people, and how you can create thought forms and shit like that. Because now when I have this craving, it's like, no, this doesn't make sense. I know I don't want to do drugs anymore. I haven't done drugs in how long now, and yet I'm craving it out of nowhere. And I can sense, I can't see, but I can sense there's something around or something. And, you know, immediately I stop what I'm doing if possible. And if not, as soon as I can, you know, I do my fucking circle. I do my fucking banishings. And it truly, 100%, okay, not 100% better, but 100% it helps. Now, you know, how much it helps you is going to depend on where you are in your development and your transformation, and how you are with your addiction. If you're just getting over drugs, well, then it might be only like a temper. Actually, the word, what habit of banishing your thoughts and reprogramming your mind, how much that can help you. Their problems would change overnight. You know, not a complete 360 or 180, but drastic, maybe 90 degree, you know, fucking triangle kind of change. I truly believe that could help, and everybody's different. Everybody's energetic body is different. I have Jupiter and Pisces, right? it's in my 11th house, but it's technically in Pisces. And, a lot of things say that when Jupiter's in the sign of Pisces, it's kind of a protection against becoming a hardcore addict, becoming an addicted personality. It'll seem like you have an addicted personality, but yet you can kind of come and go from drugs, and you don't really get too dependent on it. I mean, unless it's something like opiates where your body can literally physically get dependent on it. But even then, I've never done anything to the extreme as some people will, some women will sell their bodies to get money to get the drugs, or sleep and suck the dicks of drug dealers. And some men will rip off people, family, old ladies, knife point girls. Some girls are the same. People will do some questionable shit because their body's craving this drug. And I've never done anything like that. All right, just to keep adding on to that, that was the last recording I put on there. I was having some mic problems when I first started doing this, so I know it sounds like I'm continuing, but it's actually a few hours after I had that. But just to keep going with that thought that I was just talking about, I've never done that, and I've done some questionable things and took money from bills and things like that, but anytime I was going through withdrawal or having pain and, it was unbearable, I would possibly go around the house looking for something that I could sell, and then I wouldn't be able to do that. Something would happen and I would get money, find money, whatever, from, something else would turn up and I'd be able to, but it was slowly getting harder and harder to do that. And then I made the choice that, what do I need to do? Am I going to keep hiding this addiction and keep thinking, well, when I'm on this stuff, it's just bringing me back to normal now? It's not even about high anymore. It's about the fact that if I'm not on an opiate or a painkiller, I can't play with my daughter. I didn't have my second daughter at this time. I only had the one daughter, and she was very young. And, unless I had a pill in me, I couldn't fucking play with her. I couldn't enjoy my fucking family. All I wanted to do was be normal. And taking the drug was just making me normal at this point. So I made the choice to get off it. And it's not always going to be that simple for everybody. Listening to all the Russell Brand's things I put on so far, I got one more I'm going to play, which touch on more spirituality aspects of it. I agree with him that, the methadone, he doesn't talk about Suboxone on there, but Suboxone is, to me, if you're having pain, if you're addicted to opiates and you're having pain, methadone might be the better option. But to get off the methadone and go on the Suboxone, or if you could just, because it's only going to take about 2 to 3 days to get the Suboxone in your system where you don't have the pain anymore. And it's not as bad as a withdrawal, because it actually gets rid of the withdrawal symptoms. It's just you're actually addicted to that pain in your head. It's really psychology more than anything. So if you are battling this and you are getting into magic and all that, and you think it's stunting your magic, well, the only way it's stunting you is because through a program it's stunting you, but it's technically not actually going to stop you from being able to manifest anything. You're doing that by thinking you can't. But anyways, the spiritual aspects of it, for me, like I said, Jupiter and Pisces, Jupiter expands things, and Pisces is one of those signs that takes on energy. It's one of those, everybody has a part of that. So this is why a lot of people, whenever they started hearing about empaths, New Age and all that, they would relate to that, because everybody has Pisces in their fucking chart. And if you have a planet like Jupiter in there, or any planet that, can have this kind of effect, every planet in Pisces is going to do something for you, and it could all be along the lines of some type of empathy. There's all these different kinds of empaths and all that, and I'm not going to go and dissect that and say if it's real or not. But I know for me, having Jupiter in fucking Pisces and then having Mercury in the 12th house right around the fucking corner right beside each other, I know those two things are very much linked to the reason that if I'm around people that want to do drugs, I'm going to want to do drugs. Just like if I'm around people that want to make money, I'm going to want to make money. If I'm around people that want to play sports, I'm going to want to play sports. I take on people's energies very easy. Excuse me, and I have to cleanse my energy so much. Not so much anymore, but when I learned that's something I had to do with my placement, I was doing it every day as much as I could, and if not, it had to be done at least 2 to 3 times a week, just for me to feel like myself, like I can have my own ideas, because if not, I could take on people's energies. I talked a little bit about machetes in your house from somebody else. If you don't cleanse that energy off of there, you might think you're getting attacked, you're getting these weird thoughts from something, and it could be just from the actual things in your house that people's energy are on. Well, it's kind of the same concept, but yet it's happening to you. You're picking up people's energies, and if you're around people like narcissists or people that actually, the whole energy vampire fucking term is a real fucking term. I'm glad that term is actually out there, because it really does describe that type of person and what they do, and those people are very real. Are they people out there intentionally being an energy vampire? No. These people can be your family members that don't mean to actually harm you, but that's just their nature, their programming. But that's one of the reasons I know it was very... as much as Jupiter helps me not be addicted to things, he also expands my ability to pick up people's energies who do want to use. It's not very hard for me. One of the reasons I said earlier that talking about it can spring on the feelings of, ooh, I remember that day, that was a good day, I felt great when I did this, and, spring that on, just thinking about a memory in my head. I could pick up that energy and, almost want to use because of that. So someone like me, that's why I say it's very important to get your chart, and not just on a drug front, on all these other avenues, so you know what you're dealing with, so you know what your body is like. I mean, you're going to know these things intuitively, but until you see it, until it's pointed out to you, you're going to be like, you know what, all that makes sense, and yeah, I got to prepare for this shit. Some people will think astrology, tarot, all these things are bullshit. Someone's just telling you how you are. And that's true. Someone's telling you how you are, but they're putting it in a different perspective, and that perspective is going to help you make better decisions. And that's why these things are important. But anyways, Russell Brand talks about the spiritual implications for him. Personally, he knew there was something missing. There was a connection, and now that he knows the spiritual connection, because with the spiritual knowledge he has now, he is fulfilled and he's not using drugs. The only time he worries or thinks about using is because out of habit, out of memory, out of, sheer fucking addiction, being addicted to the feelings, being addicted to the high. Like when you smoke, you're addicted to putting a cigarette to your mouth, going outside, having a smoke break. You're not actually addicted to the fucking nicotine. So, in my case, alcohol, certain drugs that made me happy and feel out of my shell a little bit, was a big eye-opener when I started using, because I don't come from a broken home. Yes, my family had their issues, but I didn't turn to drugs out of desperation and out of fear, or I hate my life and I'm going to self-destruct. It was nothing like that. I was a very curious kid at a very young age. I was very impressionable, listening to songs, rap music at a very young age when they talked about drugs. I told you about me visualizing being a rock star and shit like that in my room as a child. Well, what went along with that? The songs I was singing, they were talking about smoking pot, Puff Daddy and Mace, the fucking Wu-Tang Clan, Notorious B.I.G., Tupac, fucking Dr. Dre. These rappers I listened to would talk about this stuff, and I would take on that energy, be it my empath energy or just being influenced as a child and getting those messages over and over in my subconscious brain. However you want to look at it, it happened and it influenced me. It ran a program of me being very curious whenever I got to grade 7 and 8 and ended up having my first joint, drinking cough syrup to get high, taking sucrets and gravel to catch a buzz, different things like that, even trying other crazy things that thank God I never stuck to, but like inhaling like Barathane, painkillers, nail polish, shit like that. That's how curious I was. I've tried all that just once and it wasn't for me. I didn't like it. It's very hard to even do anything with. Obviously I wasn't doing it right. Point is, I'm glad I didn't do it right, but being somebody who's done a lot of different drugs, I've never smoked crack cocaine, but I've done a lot of coke, snorting coke, and the reason I did it because I knew my limits, and this is probably where Jupiter saved my ass, because that's one of those very highly addictive drugs where the buzz itself is just to keep using, and I knew my limits. I knew that if I tried that, I'd probably never be able to turn it down. So I never did. Whereas you can only put up so much powder up your fucking nose, to be honest, and the money and all that too. But when you see people doing some really bad stuff when it comes to cocaine, 9 times out of 10 they're injecting it or they're smoking it. People that are snorting it, they only snort it for a while and they either go up to the next step, which is one of those two things I just mentioned, or they only stay at that level. So you can say that is what it is, but I was very impressionable, and whether that's Jupiter saving my ass, being in that sign, which is what people say. If you go on YouTube and you put Jupiter in Pisces, you're going to see that information. I'm not just making that up. But the point was that I was missing some kind of connection there. I was always very spiritual, but whenever I started not being spiritual, like trying marijuana and all these little things I just told you about, the smaller drugs, like trying to inhale things and the gravel and that was all with a girlfriend and with a friend that we were hanging out with who did these things, and he would shoot the ideas on us, and some of them I wasn't crazy about trying fucking cough syrup and gravel, but marijuana and drinking I was all for. Why? Well, my father drank a lot, and marijuana was in a lot of the songs I listened to, so those things I was all for trying. But when grade 9 or 10 hit and that girlfriend had to leave and go to Ottawa and I was heartbroken, well then it could be said that I stopped caring. I had a job, I had money, and I decided to branch out, and that's when I started drinking a hell of a lot more, skipped school, got into fights, tried fucking cocaine, branched off into shrooms, ecstasy, speed, all these different things. This is in grade 11. You're 17 years old in grade 11? But I still kept it under control. I got kicked out of school, got back in, and got my grade 12. I'm very back and forth my entire life while I'm battling drugs. And now, for the first time in my life, I can actually say confidently that the battle is under control and pretty much won. Where, there's always these little things that happen and make me want to use, but I have all the confidence in the world, and I feel I'm under control for the first time, whereas before I'd be like, I wouldn't be using, get a new girlfriend, want to be good, started college, wanted to be good, started a job, wanted to be good, and then slowly go back. When I met my wife was the biggest and the longest time I ever didn't do drugs, but then I guess the pendulum swing, the longer I was good, well, I ended up, because this programming, it was in my head, I fucking swung back to the other direction and ended up getting hooked on opiates, something I never actually tried in my youth, and I really thought that I would never do that, and then it was so hard to try to get off that myself, I couldn't do it. And it wasn't until the thought of losing her, my family, that the 2 stepboys I was raising, and my one daughter, that I'm not going to do that. Drugs aren't that important. And there's help out there, You just have to find it, look for it. I know Russell Brand talks about getting off of drugs and not using methadone maybe at first for the withdrawal, and then once you're not going to have withdrawal anymore, getting off of that. And I do believe that is probably the best option to do it, going through what I went through, and seeing everybody who is stuck on the methadone wheel. People have been off opiates I know people for 10 years, 20 years, and they're on the lowest dose of methadone, and every time they try to get off it, they can't. They'll have a couple days where it's just brutal, and they end up using, and then they end up going back up on their methadone, so they're stuck. And coming with methadone, it brings down your testosterone, which Suboxone doesn't, and a bunch of other things that come along with it. So they gotta take testosterone shots, and so when he says that, I agree with that 100%. Everybody's different, and not everybody's going to be able to do that. Eventually, that should be the goal, but the time limit's going to be unique to every person. Some people might need 2 years on something like Suboxone or methadone, where some people might need 10, and some people might just need months. It depends on the resolve, and I truly believe that if people get into the magic, get into what I'm doing now, when they find that spiritual connection that everybody's missing, because everybody has addictions, and whether it's as intense as an opiate addiction or it's, you know, as accepted and actually perpetuated and controlled, and, you know, the media is basically making us, or commercials anyways, are shopping addictions. You know, almost everybody has one of those. I don't have one of those. I like to buy stuff when I have money to buy stuff and when I want something, you know. And, you know, okay, maybe I do have a slight one because, you know, if I really want something, I'm going to go get it, but I can control my spending, you know. If it came to drugs, I couldn't, but that's not shopping, that's a drug addiction. Point is, addictions are everywhere and everybody has them, and it's all boils down to programming. What have you been programmed to really like, and is it in balance? If it's not in balance, then yeah, you're going to have a problem. Can you use drugs in a balanced way? Absolutely. I'm not advocating for it. I can't do it. That's not going to be in my nature. I'm not going to be able to balance that out. Maybe in the future, but I'm not even going to want to. Point is, I'm sure some people can do it. Some people do it. Marijuana, probably mushrooms, and probably all the spiritual drugs out there and shit like that. But Russell Brand also talks about this when he's on interviews with other people that have used DMT-based drugs. He's not going to go down that path to have a spiritual experience because of his addiction in his past and his issues, you know. And I'm the same way. I wouldn't do that. But anyways, I do believe in what he's preaching and what he's doing and all the work he's trying to do. And, you know, he's been sober for now, and technically, in a manner of speaking, so have I. But I am taking a substance to help with withdrawal that has a very small amount of opiates in it, and it has an opiate blocker in there, and it has the actual medicine you give to somebody if they're going to overdose. Therefore, as much as I'm taking in an opiate, it's also coming out of me at the same time. It's kind of like it cancels each other out almost. Now there's more, like I said, there's 8 milligrams of the drug and only 2 milligrams of the naloxone, but that means technically I'm like only getting 6 milligrams anytime I was taking 8. So if I'm taking 4, you know, I'm only taking in fucking 3 milligrams every time. And, you know, slowly but surely it keeps a little bit out of you. And it's training your body to not be dependent on it. It's kind of the goal. It's getting the drug in you, but it's also giving you the stuff that would take the drug out of you, just not high for the dose. That would take a lot more research, and all the research I do, I can't believe I've never researched my own fucking my own substance. But anyways, I just really wanted to share that, my point of view, because I didn't really hit on this stuff, and I put the Russell Brand stuff after I recorded those 3 first initial recordings on here. And I truly believe that part of my issue was, you know, coming out of my shell. I was a shy, reserved guy. I was happy around small crowds, big crowds not so much. And then alcohol, and even the cocaine in my early days, in my early 20s and stuff like that. Well, late teens, early 20s helped come out of my shell initially, and then I got paranoid as fuck. But then later on, the opiates was like, oh my god, this thing fixes everything. If you're hungover, you take it and you feel good. If you work a shitty job, you feel good. If you're in any pain, you feel good. Until you know, first time my back was killing me. I was in the hospital when my daughter was being born, and at this time I was only taking Percocets because I had a workout injury, I guess, and, you know, I decided to take that, but it was just an excuse basically to keep using, and I hadn't had any for about 10 days, and I was in the hospital, and every day, well, for 4 days of my wife was in there because she just had my daughter, C-section. My back was in so much pain, and, you know, I chalked it up to the couch until I started talking to some of the guys at work, and they're like, well, you're probably having withdrawal. What do you mean withdrawal? Why didn't you tell me this before I took the dope? It might not have mattered, and it might have, but I didn't even have a fucking clue that there was withdrawal come along with it. So do you think half those kids that are trying it right fucking now, as I'm speaking, have any clues withdrawal come with it? Hopefully, but probably not. You know, back when I started it, there wasn't as much awareness, whereas now there's a shit ton of awareness. But, you know, they may not respond, they might not care, they probably think they're never going to try it until they come to a party, and then what's that, a Percocet? Well, when they're discussing in school, they're probably saying opiates, you know, and they might give some examples, but if it's not the example they hear, they're not going to put 2 and 2 together and know that if they take that for so many days, it's going to create a withdrawal that might perpetually keep them addicted to it for potentially the rest of their life, or just, some years of their life, where they're going to ruin their relationships, their parents' relationships, steal and do all these questionable things. Girls in high school can, lose virginities to older guys and get, it's just terrible to think about, especially if you have children. So, as much as this channel is about magic, I did want to hit on this because it is something near and dear to my heart, and it's something I went through, and it's very, very much attached to spirituality. Because when you find the spirituality you're supposed to be doing, when you find that connection, when you start connecting your divine mind, or talking to goddess, or doing ceremonial magic, when you find your purpose, even if you don't get spiritual, if you find out what you're supposed to be doing in life without doing any magical curriculum or anything like that, that enough could take away your addiction and all that. People that find their purpose decide to go to a methadone clinic and get off the dope, and those are the ones that normally stick to it. They're not even doing magic. They're just so happy and fulfilled and finally found what actually fills that void inside of them. It's not drugs, it's not money, it's not sex, it's not a house, it's not cars, it's not shit, it's not food. No, it's doing something that actually means something to them. Something they feel like they're meant to do, something they would be doing anyway as a hobby, but yet they're getting paid for. That's what fills the void, and that's why people need to hear this. So maybe the people listening to me aren't addicted to drugs, and if you aren't, sorry I took up your time. I'm sorry I came out here and ranted and told you all about my fucking issues and all that, and put Russell Brand on here. The last interview is going to be a hell of a lot better, a lot cooler. It's his show, but he's being interviewed by somebody else. It's pretty cool. But if you know anybody, get this out to them. Maybe not the spiritual stuff, but maybe try to, I don't want anybody to think I'm saying drug addicts aren't bad people or they're good people. I'm not saying either one of those. I'm saying that they're misunderstood people. Russell Brand is trying to tell people that it's an actual illness, and it can be, depending on your energetic makeup, depending on your programming. It truly can be something that you had put in your head. And it can be as simple as removing that out of your head. And then, you might have to go through withdrawal if you're using a drug that has withdrawal symptoms. But if it's not, then you get rid of that programming, you get rid of that addiction. That's what I teach on this channel. And it's not any different for drugs. You want to make money, you got to get rid of the programming, put a making money programming in there. You want love, you got to get rid of whatever's stopping you from attracting that lover, and then put something in there that someone's going to fucking want. And the true person you want to be. You want a house, you want a car, you want to get rid of disease. It's all the same. Get rid of the bad programming, put in the good programming. 2 steps that, health is maybe a little more because you got to eat right and shit like that. But it's the same things for drugs, for alcohol. Same fucking thing. But anyways, I'm going to put the last fucking interview on here. I hope everybody enjoyed this. And have yourselves a great night, and I'll talk to you guys tomorrow.
Of Under the Skin, because I'm not even hosting it, I am the guest. This week Under the Skin will be hosted by the great Welsh philosopher, the Dylan of Emergent New Consciousness. It is Brad Evans, and what this man doesn't know about violence isn't worth knowing, and I'll lacerate myself and kick my own head in before I deny his knowledge of the subject of violence. With my book coming out, Brad has kindly agreed to interview me on the subject of recovery. Brad, I admire you very much as a philosopher. Over the course of this excursion into the subcutaneous world, we have become friends, and I'm very grateful for you doing this. I will now hand over full authority to you. And bow as I do.
Yeah, I'd like to begin by saying I've obviously read an advanced copy of your book, and it was actually a real privilege to read it. And I was actually taken by a lot of the courage that you put down on the pages. So that to me is something to be deeply applauded. Now, the one thing I guess, I'm also, kind of humbled that you actually showed trust in me to do this. So thank you, and thank you for our friendship. That's something worth, cherishing. I'd like to go, directly into this question. As I say, it's kind of, it's interesting being on the other side of this. And the one thing which I kind of think about, is that for anybody who writes a book, they know that it's a whole series of procrastinations. Sometimes it takes months, often it takes years. And I guess the first thing that really struck me was what compelled you to write this book at this particular point in your life?
I feel that anybody that's in recovery has this experience where what begins as something that you're using to tackle a particular addiction, in my case initially, crack and heroin, becomes sort of over time, like I realised that the tools and techniques I was using to one day at a time not use drugs and alcohol were becoming utilised in every area of my life. The way that I feel about sex, the way that I feel about food, all behaviour and all forms of attachment can be tackled, or at least my perception of them can be altered by working the 12 steps. So, excuse me, coffee, mate. But so what I felt was like this, like at this point in my life where I feel like I've gone through so many layers of disillusionment with fame, disillusionment with Hollywood, disillusionment with sex, and disillusionment is, I think, by and large, a bloody good thing. Who wants to be illusioned? You know, like so, you know, and like so, I felt like the recovery is the lens through which I live my life. It's that my relationship is conducted through the program that I describe in this book. Obviously, my spiritual development, the way that I relate to other people. I by no means do it perfectly, but it's a technique that's so effective that I want to expound it because I've seen it change lives of people with really serious chemical dependency, really serious behavioural problems, and I think it's a technique that offers us a kind of counterweight to the overriding ideology of our time, which seems to me to be a kind of determined and yet unconscious self-centeredness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, when I was reading the manuscript, and this call for transformation really comes through there, and you can see there's a very personal journey that you go on. I guess I was trying to figure out what type of book it actually was. And I know this is bloody ironic coming from a so-called postmodernist, right? That I was trying to label it and classify it. And I think, in an affirmative way, it's almost like an anti-self-help book. And I think what I try to mean by this is that I think the central message which really jumps off the pages is that it's precisely these kind of traits of a self-centered, individualistic, kind of fuck-the-world narrative and all its kind of loving sentiments, which kind of gets us into this fix in the first place, this kind of just help-yourself narrative. And I think what really, to me, comes out of this is more about a sober and perhaps more truthful cry for human connection. Is that where you see the hope for the book?
Yes, because I think our culture and our biochemistry collude to create a kind of chronic individualism. And I feel that the natural conclusion of a kind of a secular rejection of the mystical leads us to the conclusion that we're just individuals. We're here to survive. We're here to fulfill our impulses. In the original 12-step literature, it says, like, we have no argument with those people that say perhaps man's purpose is simply to fulfill these biochemical drives, to procreate, to survive, to dominate the selfish gene approach. But he says one thing we're certain of is no one has made a worse mess of this way of life than we that suffer from alcoholism and addiction. And like me, when I try to live my life as a means to find personal fulfillment, I get into sort of a kind of peculiar despair. I start to feel lonely, I start to feel disconnected. That don't mean I don't pick up the cudgel once again and try to find my way back to false profits. Why I feel qualified to write a book on addiction is because I've been addicted to heroin, I've been addicted to crack, I've been addicted to fame, money, sex, relationships, other people's approval. I see this phenomena emerge again and again, and I'm starting to think that the label of addiction in itself is too confining, that actually this is the human condition in motion, yearning itself, yearning. And we live in a culture, I think, that uses as its fuel this will to acquire. I thought it's become... The reason I wrote the book is because it seems to me that simple though this is, and particular though it is in origin, it tailed within it are tools that could change people's perspective in quite a profound way. And what you say there, Brad, about it takes you from a point of view of going, oh, if only I can get this, when I get that I'll be cool, or if that person understood me, or if I could have sex with that person, or if I could get those shoes. All of these being personal examples from my own life. Like, everything will be okay, and it doesn't work. But if I go, like, and I don't do it enough, because every day I wake up once again bewitched and hypnotised by individualism. But when I go and spend time helping other people, sometimes in real blatant sub-Princess Diana ways, like going to a homeless shelter and getting proper hands-on and being amongst it, or if just on a basic communal way, like we human beings should be, taking phone calls from other people that are suffering, reaching out and talking about their problems for a change, which, it's odd that it needed to be formatted for me to understand it, because I'm sure a lot of people just bloody do it naturally, but it just gives me a different way of talking to my mates. If my mates are going through relationship struggles or personal struggles or work struggles, I think, oh right, well this is good because I can connect to you here, and while I'm talking to you I won't be thinking about myself and my own problem. And the more I do it, I think, like in Christianity, Brad, I want to know what you think about all this stuff, man. Like when it talks, like when Christ says, get down with the poor, like that's where it's at. It's not like, oh my God, look at their scars and lesions. It's like there's some energy there when you're helping others, and and not only that, the other people that help others are beautiful. So you start to feel a kind of elevated sense of connection, purpose, meaning, all of these words that are, I think, being increasingly marginalised, empathy, all these things that are being excluded from the sort of political ideologies of our time and the social ideologies of our time, suddenly become accessible through the most basic things.
Yeah, and there's an interesting point in terms of, I think we can all kind of know in our lives when human connections seem deeply meaningful to us, right? And we know that these connections exist, and we thrive on them, and we know that they're kind of really reciprocal because they're based on an ethical understanding and an idea of love with one another. But we're often driven, actually, to relationships, which, as you say, we're trying to seek affirmation in the wrong places, and they become very toxic, and sometimes society can actually promote those types of relationships, which we know are actually deeply, detrimental to ourselves, to our emotional well-being, to our intellectual well-being, and yet we still strive for them. And even though we know they are completely empty, meaningless, or indeed maybe nihilistic in terms of our own sense of self, and I think that's...
Possibly romanticism. I'm not saying that romanticism is a mendacious idea, but the notion that you can find fulfillment by being with some aspirational figure, some deity, some living goddess, your own personal Jesus. I'll find salvation if I find the one. That idea, I think, is highly prevalent. But even more toxic than this, I think, is the commodification of relationships that happens on quite... As I say, it's a collusion between biochemistry and culture. Like, it's very natural, I think, on some level, to meet a man and think, what can this man do for me? Can he serve me? Can he make me feel better? Can I make money? Is he going to be a good ally in a fight? What can I do with it? Or in my case with women, do I want to have sexual intercourse with that woman? Is this person going to make me feel better about myself? This is the commodification and the objectification. It happens, in my case, it happened quite automatically. I have to work to not approach relationship in that way. So for me, the program is the antidote to the type of thinking to which I have a tendency. That's all addiction is a tendency. Left on my own, I will go that way, unless I intervene, unless there is a program. And the other thing, Brad, I think it seems to me to be important, is we don't choose between a program and no program. We have a program. You have the program of your family, you have the program of your society, you have the program of your culture, you have the program of consumerism. If you don't undo that program, if you do not decode yourself like someone leaving a cult, then that's the program you're living with. The program of I'm not good enough, I'll never be good enough unless I get this object or that object, I won't be good enough unless that person can accept me. Now, what I think this offers, because it was designed to tackle alcoholism and addiction, is a way of untangling the strands that web us to materialism, consumerism, and objectification and individualism. All these things that are based on the idea that what can be measured, what can be weighed is what is important. See, like, it's not like I am anti-atheist in any kind of, I know loads of people that are atheists, probably you, like, that are fantastic and incredibly smart and compassionate and wonderful people. My concern is that there's a thread within atheism that tells you that the only thing that matters is that which can be ascertained, and science in all of its main disciplines is forever peripheral, forever on the brink of new discoveries. And when you get someone like Elon Musk saying, look, with the kind of virtual reality technologies we have now, there's no way of proving that we're not all currently living in a virtual reality. And I had a go on my mate's virtual reality thing, my little mate Ezra, he's only 11 years old, and I thought, oh my God, you can be immersed now in a totally different reality. So Elon Musk saying, if we can do that, imagine what other cultures could conceivably do. You can't rule out the possibility that this is one. Well, bloody hell, that's what it says in the Bhagavad Gita, except it doesn't use the word computer. What is it that you want? Now we're saying, yes, the material world is an illusion that's it's transmitted into your consciousness through the senses. You reconfigure it, and the inflections of your culture denote what meaning you attribute to the external stimuli. Now, the only way of decoding that, I think, well, not the only way, but a way of decoding that is by, in personal crisis, you get the opportunity to reevaluate. That crisis could be divorce, it could be drug addiction, it could be heartbreak or some other existential crisis. But when you're at that point, whether as an individual or as a society, you can say, is this the kind of life I want to believe, that I want to live? Do I believe it could be different? Am I willing to accept help? Once you take those three steps, it's possible to have transformation. After that, there's a process of inventorying, a willingness to change, and then a devotion to conscious contact and to service. And then you've got a completely different way of looking at the world.
Yeah, I think this re-evaluation is, it strikes me as a really important thing, but it's also a very difficult thing, right? To start to re-evaluate everything about your own sense of self, your sense of behaviour. It's often easier to project your troubles onto other people rather than actually saying, is there something about my own self which I need to, how am I shamefully compromising with power in a way that's affecting my own relationships, the way I'm objectifying things, deification and so on. But I want to bring us on to the step that you said, because I think when I was reading the book, the first kind of couple of chapters was kind of like, yeah, I can go with this, right? It's kind of, there's this step around, okay, admit you have a problem, then go and speak with somebody. Then you go into this section, now what you need to do is write an inventory of all the things which really piss you off, right? And I go, whoa, wait a minute, right? This is where it's starting to get challenging, right? And it's going to start to get difficult. And you even say those words at the beginning. You say, look, this is not easy, right? This is difficult. And you talk about, let's write down all those things which you think create an assault on your sense of selfhood, on your sense of dignity. And, and the phrase you actually use here is the uncomfortable confrontations, right? So deal with this uncomfortable confrontations in your life. And I was wondering, how did you actually feel, of course, from writing the book? Because in many senses, you must have had to revisit a lot of uncomfortable confrontations, which you had already might have kind of dealt with. But in writing the book, there was almost like an attempt to kind of revisit those issues. And, how did you feel writing this book?
Because of the efficacy of the programme, Brad, it did not feel like the resurrection of the cadavers of my past, because they have been buried, and even in exhuming them, this metaphor's going well, for the purpose of the book, it didn't. They don't bring them back to life. Now, I have a propensity to return to states of shame. I have that in me. It's easily triggered in me. It's easily triggered. Like leading up to my wedding, because I think this is the way I sort of have been explaining this. You might like it, right? My mate Matt Morgan, he said to me, he keeps climbing up saying hi. He went, don't climb up there, else you'll fall and your head will smash open like an egg. Right, and ever since Matt said that, a little boy Cullen keeps going, oh no, my head will smash like an egg. Matt said the image is too lurid for the child to be able to handle, it's too potent an image. Right, so me, getting married, I don't think, I'm getting married in the morning, like Stan Holloway. I think, well, what is marriage? Marriage is a ceremony. This is a ritual. This is about the relinquishing of the ego. This is about coming together and making a vow to become a different man and to live in alignment with new principles. So because I'm looking at what or inadvertently or accidentally, with not consciously but somehow actually looking at what is the meaning of a marriage, it induces a state in me. That's the point of ritual, to induce a particular state. Meredith says, my friend Meredith, she goes, people think that religion is about the text, it is about the ritual. It doesn't matter if you can't understand the Latin Mass. Better to just hear a lot of babbling and sort of think, what is this guy talking about? Which I'm sure some people identify with right now. It's like the ritual induced a state in me. The fear was so terrible. The fear was so terrible, Brad. I thought, what am I going to do? And I had to use this program to cope with the level of fear I felt about getting married the next day. Not any fear about marrying my wife, because I really want to and really wanted to, but something about that ritual, that ceremony, it meant something. It wasn't nothing. It wasn't, oh, it's only a bit of paper, so turn up at church and then a party. No, my friends. There is the unseen. There is the invisible. Something happened to me, and I had to surrender 100%. I had to surrender. I said, what is this fear trying to tell me? What does the fear want? The fear is communicating. The fear is talking to me from my own biochemistry, from my own body, from my own consciousness. A message, a powerful message is being sent. And if I don't listen to it, something bad is going to happen to me. I surrendered wholeheartedly. And every time I do that, my life improves. New states of consciousness are achieved through the surrendering of these biochemical circuits that somehow contain us, these neurological loops that we allow to encircle us and tether us to low states of consciousness.
I think, I'm
thinking that yesterday on the bus.
I'm taking this new state of consciousness, but I want to connect it back to a question of philosophy, because the trouble is with us bloody critical theories is we can't read any book without actually looking for the political and philosophical implications, right?
Go on.
So I'll read Alice in Wonderland and go, this is the best bloody book of political theory ever written, right? But often we read books and actually a lot of them are just devoid of any significant philosophical significance or implications. In other words, they don't force you to think about a problem differently, right? Now, the one thing which I admired about the book was it actually has a very deep political philosophical architecture to it. And the one thing which I was kind of struck with the book, and what I was kind of excited when I was reading with it, is when you talk about this attempt to connection, you also link it to the question, of course, life is very fleeting, life is short, and we need to find these connections and a meaningful existence. And I think what the book really kind of finds almost like a rescue in, for me, is an attempt to introduce something of the substantive over the superficial. And the substantive for you is spiritual. And I was wondering how you can kind of maybe, talk maybe a bit more about that. What is it about the spiritual that is substantive for you in terms of dealing precisely with maybe the philosophy of the book?
What is substantial about the spiritual to me is its efficacy. It works. When I do these things, I feel better. When I am kind, when I am loving, when I surrender, I feel better. Now, these things can't be measured, mechanized or monetized, but they are in fact effective. There is some truth in them that is difficult to legislate or iterate. So that's why it works for me. And I think perhaps the reason that this program is so good is I didn't invent it. It was invented or constructed by someone else. Like, in the 1930s in America, a chronic alcoholic, Bill Wilson, who after an incredible sort of an epic drinking binge, the type which had defined his life, had what he described as an epiphany, and I believe epiphany to be the revelation of essence, the previously concealed revelation of essence. Why do I feel this way? What's going on? Suddenly, you know why. And Bill Wilson has this epiphany and realises that he will never be able to be free from drinking and the problems that result from it unless he helps other people to not. He realises, one, he can never drink again, one day at a time. Two, he's going to have to help other people that have the same problem in order to achieve this state, and sets about it immediately. First of all, troubling drunks in New York, going up to people in bars, going, let me help you, and then predictably saying, no, get off, leave me alone. Then eventually he has this sort of a program, an experience which is the myth of the foundation of Alcoholics Anonymous, is the significant moment, the defining moment, the conception, I suppose. He's in Akron, Ohio, and for a business appointment, and it comes on him. He's in the hotel that he's staying at, and he sees the bar, and he hears the music, and he's tempted to go in. But adjacent to the entrance to the door is a public telephone. This is the 1930s, remember? And he takes a chance, and he rings up, and he calls up a local priest and says, look, have you got anyone, or a doctor maybe he calls, have you got anyone, he calls a priest, have you got anyone in this area that's been coming in going, I'm a terrible drunk, help me. And that guy goes, yeah, we have. He goes, can you put me in touch with that guy, because I need some serious help, and I want to help him. And he goes, oh yeah, this guy needs a few more phone calls here and there as they make the connection, but eventually ends up with Dr. Bob, the other founder of Alcoholics Anonymous goes around his house and he says to this guy, listen, I've got this problem, I'm unable to stop drinking once I start, it's ruining my life, I'm ruining my relationships, all my job opportunities fall apart, it's destroying me. He explains to him his condition. The other guy starts talking about his problems, the two of them having initially, like apparently the Dr. Bob guy was like, I'm only going to tell you, like he told his secretary, come get this guy after 10 minutes, okay, it seems a bit weird, I'm getting phone calls out of the blue, people want to talk about booze. They end up talking for hours and hours and hours. They recognise that the
thoughts are and how getting into
me, Brad, within grows and grows, people realise, oh my God, this works, it works. Now, it's written in the Christian language of the time, it's written in the patriarchal terminology of the time. It's also, understandably, protective of its identity. The anonymity is to make sure that AA as a thing is protected and that no one person, certainly not me, can say, hey, I'm Mr. AA, because I know that I'm really still crazy. I could drink or take drugs. Tomorrow something happens, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm certainly, as I make clear in the book, it's not written from a position of authority. It's written from a position of experience. I don't know better than anybody. I don't know what crazy things I'm going to do. But I know that if I work this program, I'll be all right. If I work this program, I'll be all right. The only problems start for me when I go, I think I'll take control of this situation and start that. Because me then, ego, desire, pleasure, fear, rage, the other program steps back in. So the reason the spirit is important, because it's the only thing that can transcend the material. It's the only thing that can house it. It is the crucible of the material world. What is consciousness? Where did it come from? What the fucking hell is going on, Brad? And for me, this very simple tool gives us access to consciousness in a way that we will not attain if we live in accordance with our biochemical drives and a culture that uses it to turn us into passive consumers.
Yeah. I think you can connect this to the politics of the times in terms of, on the one hand, we're constantly told that nobody's in control, right? So we have to accept insecurity, vulnerability, and that can lead to a lot of people being anxious. But what you seem to be saying is actually letting go of this very ridiculous idea that we can be in control of other people's behaviours, other people's lives, like bloody North Korea this morning. If we dwell on these things, then we're going to live in in this constant state of anxiety about things we can't possibly deal with. And I think that's and how do we seek some kind of affirmation out of this? Well, maybe to turn to, as I say, a different sense of the consciousness might be the alternative to that. But I want to come back to your story about, this question of confiding, because the example you talk about, these two guys who speak in, and of course they are confiding in one another. Yeah. And that idea of to confide in one another, of course, requires confidence, right? To confide requires confidence. You need to have the confidence to confide in somebody. And it might be a random stranger, but at least you have an established trust around this kind of sense of, of the confidence. And there's a particular passage I want to read from the book. Not only, I think, because it brought a tear to my eye, and I don't want to shatter any illusions people have of me. I do have emotions every now and again.
You don't seem like it.
Yeah.
I did an episode of The Truths on Suicide, and it's like you were reading the side of a tin of beans. No, you're very emotional when you're joking.
But also because, I think it really addresses what's at stake here, and this kind of, it says, suddenly my fraught and frightened childhood became reasonable and soothed. My mum was doing her best, and so was my dad. Yes, people made mistakes, but that's what humans do. And I am under no obligation to hoard these errors and allow them to clutter my perception of the present. Yes, it is wrong that I was abused as a child, but there is no reason for me to relive it, consciously or unconsciously, in a way that I conduct my adult relationship. My perceptions of reality, even my own memories, are not objective or absolute. They are biased and they can be altered. Now, this to me is a really powerful passage in the book, because what you're talking about is not only can we sometimes, decide, and we do have a choice around, you talk about the things that we hoard and carry along with us. I'm not saying that we can ever forget them or we can outlive them, but we can choose whether they define our lives or not. And the central message which I think comes out of this is a very positive message. If you do confide in others, that's where the transformation comes. You cannot simply wake up one day and say, I'm going to be an entirely new subjectivity. Right? It doesn't happen that way, because in order to change your behaviour, you need to change your behaviour in the eyes of others. Right? We are human, we're not human beings, we're human becomings. Right? We're always connecting to people and disconnecting and reconnecting. And in that sense, it requires a certain, confidence to transform. And I wonder what you think about it in terms of your experience.
I think you're right, Brad. One of the things that recurs lately since Yanis Varoufakis said it on this podcast was, we exist in dialectic. What is kind of like, seal me in a pod and shoot me into space? Like, what am I? What am I without? Or as Jarvis Cocker put it more simply, without people, we are nothing. Yeah, you're quite right that it is a collective and communal activity. This book, you could read it on your own, you could do the program on your own, but primarily it's about how you relate to yourself and how you relate to other people. And the passage that you read from my book, just to clarify, the abuse happened outside of my family. And the thing that I think is important about my stance, that one can alter the perception of the past, and if you alter your perception of the past, you alter the present, is that, as I said there is no objective reality, but you're right, this is going to be a state that's difficult to achieve just sat in your room. You can't just say that to yourself. It has to be realised in relationship, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I want to connect this then to the social implications of the project. Now, you've already talked about, you see kind of addiction as something which is not just an individual pathology, but it's a social construct, right? Society gives you these certain values, and those values in many ways play to the human desires in a way which lend themselves to addictive personalities. And actually we're taught to desire the very things which could bring us back down to on our knees. And there's something about the tabloid press in Britain which is kind of revealing of this. We like nothing more than the celebrity who falls, right? Because it's almost like that's not the system failing, it's working all too well, right? Because we kind of expect this, right? We want this to kind of happen. And, but I want to kind of connect it also to your other work on, and I think some of the other powerful work and advocacy work you've done on the war on drugs, and linking this question of addiction to drugs. Now, as we know, historically, the war on drugs has been kind of separated between almost like a war legal paradigm versus a health development paradigm. Now, I think the shift towards seeing it as a health problem is a positive shift away from the war paradigm. But too often, when we shift it then to the health paradigm, it invariably retreats back into individual pathology, right? It's the person who's just simply at fault because, they've fallen through the cracks or whatever else. And I think what your book is also trying to do is add another layer onto this and say, yes, addiction is a health problem. It's a mental health problem. But unless we understand the social consequences and the social effects which give rise to this problem and constantly feed it, then we will not gain a real tangible purchase on this.
Like in historical terms, this is only the 1930s. We're in 2017 now. This thing grows, particularly in the United States, economically requires slavery in some form to sustain itself. The health model, you're right. I hadn't really thought of that. So, there is undoubtedly, like, addiction can affect anybody, but it is certainly exacerbated by economic depravity. Like, even the crack houses, I've never really sort of questioned the idea that that's just an house. Like, it's not really a crack house. And you include people. It would become a more inclusive society. I think this model of sacrificing Christianity, the sacrificed God, for me, advice that exists with, I don't fucking live. I want to be clean. And I sort of like some wave hit me of like the truth of what he was saying and the beauty. So I thought, I learn about this person. I got his number, stayed in touch with him. The week leading up to the amputation, he's fine. The night before the amputation, he's fine. Throughout the amputation, I speak to him the next day. He's on a bed, admittedly on opiates because of the nature of the pain medication. He was blissfully happy, and he continues to be. But no, bloody hell. And he goes, no, I'm good. I want to, again, as we say, so it works on an individual level. But you're quite right, Brad. It's not something that we should ascribe to individual pathology, because where are these bloody boundaries? What do you mean an individual? We're all made of the same stuff. We're all thinking the same thoughts. We're all feeling the same feelings, other than the variety provided by cultural inflection and social conditions. We're all basically the same. So, like, if we have systems that encourage empathy, if we have systems that emphasise the corollary and connection between us, then we will build a better society.
Yeah. And I want to push you on the title, which is recovery. And I think, you could offer almost like a simplistic reductive reading of the title, which is almost like, how can you kind of go back to a previous better self, right? So how do I recover myself? It's almost like the George Best question, right? Where does it all go wrong in your life, right? And then if you can pinpoint this, but as you say, for a lot of people who are in this condition, it's the social forces, the complex social forces. There is no pinpointable moment in somebody's life where you can say this is kind of where it all goes wrong. But I think the way I understand and the way you're using the term recovery also is also a critique of the idea that we can live a perfectible life. And one of the striking things which comes out for me of this is kind of a humility with what you're talking about is, on the one hand, not only not to take yourself too seriously, although we have to deal with serious issues in the world, but also this idea that it's okay not to be okay sometimes. And to admit this is no bad thing.
That's true, and this is something, again, I've only really found within spiritual conversations and spiritual, not doctrine, that ain't the right word, but it's like, for me, this has always been framed spiritually. Like when I talked to Sharon Salzberg on this podcast, she said that when you're meditating, it's normal that you start thinking all the time. You don't punish yourself for that. You just return to the mantra or return to the breath. You accept fallibility as part of the equation of your humanity, that you, to a degree, relinquish the idea of perfection, but sort of somewhat paradoxically, I suppose, Brad, that one of the meaning, communion in conversation within a system, we are engaged, we must be reborn unto the present, so that we can become really what we are, so that we can become what we are. System of sales, just as a statistic.
Right? But I'm already dead, right? And looking at the future, how can we learn and maybe take the voices of these people much more seriously? In terms of, if we appreciate we're all kind of knee-deep in the mud, right? And we know existence is tragic, but we know existence is also wonderful, right? So how can we maybe learn to go beyond this question of just simply learning how to die and look at life from the perspective of death and become much more affirmative of what we actually have in this all too fleeting existence?
Well, for me, Brad, it's become certain quite simplistic attitudinal shifts, such as acceptance, gratitude, that I relinquish the idea that I'm not homeless in a gutter, smacked up off my nut because I'm somehow superior, but just because of a random set of coordinates and events have deposited me in a comfortable life, and I'm really, really lucky and gracious. So I don't have a punitive attitude towards those people, and I see them in sort of sometimes they're right arseholes, but where I can, as repositories potentially of great truths and important information. One of the recovery charities or organisations I do work with, BAC O'Connor, they run facilities in Burton-on-Trent in the United Kingdom and Stoke-on-Trent, in the Midlands, those areas. And I went to an event with them the other day, and just spoke to service users, which means in this case drug addicts and stuff, and to talk through what they're doing in their program. The counsellors, a good number of the counsellors themselves, people in recovery, which I think is always very, very helpful. And then afterwards, my wife was there, sat in they put on a lovely spread for us, God love them, sort of some crisps and maybe something even as far-flung as bruschetta, but the kind of bruschetta one would get in Stoke-on-Trent. Ketchup may have been involved. I'm only joking, it's perfectly nice. Anyway, there's this bloke there who was a proper to glance at. If you can imagine Shaggy from the cartoon Scooby-Doo, but he slept outside for a year and he's had a bloody good kicking and no dental work. This is what this guy looked like, thin, broken, and he's a drug addict, obviously, and he's come late and he's thin as fuck, and he's ransacking the buffet quite gently, just thinking, there's food there, I'll take that, and sort of packing it up and stuff. And I goes, all right, mate, and I goes, oh yeah, you're you, aren't you? And I'm like, yeah, that's right, and because I'm when I'm among other people that have got addiction issues, I feel like I don't have the obligation to try and act like I know what I'm doing, or that I'm